So I think we can all agree that this one got a little out of hand. I tried to make it interesting. There is stuff to look at, but stick it on your second monitor, fold your laundry, do the dishes, clean up your dailies in your MMO of choice. Just, I'm sorry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is, for now, the last video in this big, grand Cooperative Conversations undertaking. We played 6 Halo games.
Yeah, reach counts. And ODST.
They all just blend together.
Yeah, they kind of do. It kind of becomes a mush when you do them back to back.
So, yeah, that's what we did. We spent the last many weeks uploading these videos, playing these games, waiting for the next one to come out on PC, because, let's pull back the curtain a little bit, we tended to play these games over the course of like 1 or 2 sittings, and then I had to make sure I knew what had happened in each one when I uploaded them. So it was a way for us to keep it consistent, but, you know, the end result, gave me plenty of time to edit, at least.
There were a couple of breaks, and I don't know, you might be able to notice them. Just based on me repeating points that I might have already made.
Well, it all just blends together.
It does.
So I think that's the biggest takeaway about this series, is that it all just kind of blends together. But we are here now in this video to give you all our final thoughts, our big post-mortem on the entire Master Chief Collection and the games collected therein.
Looking back, I think we made a lot of good and salient points and then rambled about them.
I think we made a couple good points throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. Hopefully, if you're an aspiring science fiction writer, you picked up a thing or two, some small pieces of wisdom that might help you.
Yeah. Like, don't just rewrite a thing you like, but worse.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Reckon talked a lot about the story writing and the influences of the story. And I say influences, I'm being generous, right?
Yeah.
The stuff it ripped off. I tried to, keep it balanced, talk about the game side of the game, the mechanical stuff. But the thing is that the games very quickly run out of new things mechanically to speak about. And the level design doesn't really get better as the series goes. So you just run out of things to say and devolve into dragging the story like I did.
Yeah, it does present a very weird thing, because I'm sure it would be very easy if I were like a different kind of YouTube man to make a single 45-minute video about each game and be like, here is X, Y, and Z for each one. But doing this full Let's Play series of the entire thing, one mission at a time, yeah, the best you can comment on is just like, well, this is this set piece, it's where we fight a big guy, or it's where we drive around and have a tank.
But I think that was a good call, because it illustrates how, like, there are things that people remember from these games, but how spaced out they are. How much of the game is just colorful guys at the end of a hallway and you shoot them, right?
Yeah, it's really wild that there's so little, both narratively and mechanically, in the game, that everything feels like filler. I was talking about how if they actually wanted to tell these stories properly, they needed to make the games longer, but as it stands, these games should have been shorter if they just wanted to do set pieces. Because they end up repeating so many, and so many of the levels in Halo 1 and 2 especially go on twice as long as they need to.
Well, now I get to touch on, I get to branch into discussing the impact of the game on other developers and marketing and whatnot, because this is a lesson that Call of Duty learned and made it an absolute raging success, right? Is that cut the filler, put in all the killer. Just go from set piece to set piece. And that has its own problems. That can become exhausting when everything is at the peak and there's no valley. We don't want to dive too far into that.
It's interesting because, you know, like you're saying, you can't have all these peaks. It feels like Bungie almost didn't know what kind of series they were trying to make. Like, the gameplay people thought they were making this, you know, balls to the wall, breakneck action game, but the story people thought they were telling this epic space opera of betrayal and ancient artifacts and destiny, but not destiny. And like when they came together, they just got in each other's way and tripped over their own feet, and so you have these long stretches of just like, you are walking through a large area firing weapons at mans, and nobody's telling you a story, and then you have a story that's trying to hit 10 different points in the same sentence and manages none of it. Going forward, we're going to talk about each game in release order, and then we're going to move on to less concrete things like the series overall, some things people attribute to the Halo series that maybe they don't need to or they shouldn't. There are other games in this series that I have actually played, surprise of surprises. I've played the top-down shooters, I've played the RTS. They're enjoyable enough, and I've got a handful of words to say about them. Not a whole lot, just because it's not the focus of the series, it's not what we played, but I think they're worth mentioning at least. But, you know, later. Let's move on to the game that started it all, for better or worse. Halo 1, also subtitled, a subtitle I hate. You say it. I don't want to say it.
What, Custom Edition?
Oh yeah, that's what the CE stands for.
If only. No, Combat Evolved, sadly.
And why do I hate that it's called Combat Evolved? Hey,
before we get into that, let's be fair. There are dead ends in Evolution.
Yeah, that's true.
The combat in Halo 1 evolved into a dead end and died out.
The dodo was, in fact, a bird.
But yes, Halo, in the briefest summary, the crystallization of my thoughts that I can make is that the game is a collection of promising ideas that were not built upon. And the final product is something that doesn't even feel finished.
It's definitely very undercooked. It's a collection, like you said, of ideas and mechanics, but like they don't do much with them, and they run out very quickly.
Looking back at Halo with a modern lens, not through the eyes of someone playing it for the first time, Halo 1 feels like what you would call a prototype now. It feels like the prototype of a game that someone would then go to iterate upon. And the funny thing is that the iterations upon that prototype didn't even really add more.
Well, I actually do want to talk about that because I agree, Halo 1 definitely feels... I tend to hate this description because I think it trivializes a lot of the actual effort that goes into video games, but here, I mean it. I think Halo 1 plays like a tech demo. Like a little sandbox thing you'd get with your graphics card. When I got an 8800, back in when those were relevant, it came with this little physics toy that had real-time cloth simulation where you could fire a ball at a flag and poke holes in the flag. And like, that's a tech demo. And that's what Halo 1 feels like to me. It's like, look, we put big areas in a console. You know, a gaming machine notable for not having a lot of memory. We put vehicles with a decent driving model in a first-person shooter. That's cool, right? Look, we have high-resolution skyboxes, which, you know, a 1024 by 1024 JPEG is impressive, I guess, again, when you have a gaming system that's known for not having enough memory to hold that kind of stuff, I guess.
Well, that's the thing, is that I really want to stress how serious we are when we say tech demo or prototype. We're not just being dismissive, because there are elements of hard work in Halo 1, especially getting something like that to run on a console. But when we say it feels like a tech demo or a prototype, look at things like the engine room on the Pillar of Autumn in the final stage. Look at the asset reuse in like making you repeat stages forwards and backwards
without any notable difference.
Things like the Flood using human weapons. You could say that, oh, that's because they're zombies, they're space zombies. But that is also just a very smart reuse of things that already exist, like, say, the AI for Marines that can shoot enemies.
It is, and it's also a dire misreading of why your game mechanics work, which we talked about at the time. Refresher, the Covenant all use projectile weapons with travel time, which grants you the ability to dodge incoming fire, and if you can't, you can absorb some with your shield, which is where the two forms of health come in between, shield and health points. Classic. That alone is like a pretty smart and interesting idea for combat in a shooter, especially coming out of the 90s, but when you give the Flood hit scan weapons, it invalidates the entire combat dynamic you've built into your game.
And the funny thing is in the stages that very clearly were made when they had time and money. For example, 343 Guilty, where you encounter the Flood for the first time. Your encounters with Flood that use human weapons are minimal. And it's only to remind you that the Flood used to be human. The problem comes when they had to make enough content to put on a disc and ship and sell as a game. You get the library, where it's just the same corridor mirrored however many times and a bunch of Flood that attack you. And then it becomes very clear that they never intended, or they simply didn't care about, that the Flood using human shotguns and rocket launchers and stuff wasn't necessarily something that you were supposed to deal with a lot. But they had to ship a game. So
yeah, when you turn a corner and you find yourself staring down the fourth group of a dozen Flood wielding assault rifles and pistols and shotguns, it's like, why did you only put 2 health packs in this level?
That's the thing, is that Halo 1 is very much a prototype or tech demo, where they wanted to show off all the cool things they could do with the Xbox, and then someone said, okay, now make it into a game.
And it's weird that it feels so much like that, because I was going on the entire playthrough about how if you like Halo 1, you should just play Unreal, because it's a better version of that. I mean, you're going to miss your vehicles, and I guess if that's what you play Halo 1 for, you're not going to get that in Unreal, but the couple times you get to use vehicles in Halo 1, you don't really... I don't know. I don't see it myself. But Unreal had proven 3 years prior that you could have wide open areas and still have content in those areas, because, again, one of my biggest problems with Halo 1's design is that it has these massive areas. It's like, yes, this is very impressive on a technological level, but what purpose does this area serve in the game? And the answer is to waste your time. You come out into a big area and you look around and you see nothing. You're just gonna go find the exit.
You can point directly at the first time the game gives you a Warthog when you're on the Halo ring, right? They drop off a Warthog via Pelican, and then you drive through a big canyon with nothing in it. It doesn't even really have bushes, as far as I remember.
No.
And then you drive through boxy 45-degree angle grey corridors. And then you come out to another canyon that has a creek and some foliage, a couple of enemies. So that is an area, right? And it has the escape pod that's crashed, and you go to the different areas where the gameplay is. But that initial corridor and valley that you drive through after the Warthog gets dropped off is literally just there to be a large space for you to drive the vehicle in. There's nothing to find. There's no enemies for you to run over. There's nothing. It's just connective tissue.
Yeah, and there's...
Which is what you're talking about.
Yeah, speaking of these wide open areas and the level where you just drive around. And of course, we're talking about level 2 of Halo 1 called Halo. It really sets the tone for how the rest of the game is going to be and what you should expect from it. Because even before you're given a Warthog to drive 200 feet through empty terrain before you have to get out again, you have the sequence where you crash land on the ring and you get out and you're taking a look around at this brand new massive environment, and what happens?
Warning. I've detected multiple Covenant dropships on approach. I recommend moving into those hills.
The first thing you're doing is attempting to immerse yourself in this world, and the game tells you to stop doing that and to hurry up and go somewhere else.
Because it's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. So let's say you do. You run away. You're like, oh, okay, I'll run away. Maybe I can scope out the terrain after this. Oh, excellent. So you escape the landing craft, and you're like, oh, let me take a look over at the dropship. Like, what are they going to be doing? Are they going to be searching for survivors? Are they going to be, like, taking readings? So you look through your pistol's scope, and you see the enemies staring directly back at you and doing nothing else, because they know where you are. They might even shoot at you, depending on how quick you were.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love about Unreal is that enemies are very rarely just waiting for you. There are only a couple levels in the game where enemies are sitting around waiting for something to happen to them, notably you with a gun to happen to them. You can always find an enemy doing something. You know, maybe they're checking their weapon, looking out over the scenery, harassing one of the natives, working at a console, taking a nap, or maybe even just hanging out playing dice. And there is a very similar, not identical, I'm not saying Bungie stole this, but there's a very similar thing that happens where you crash land in the ship, you get out, you have this massive open area you're looking around, and there are no enemies. You're free to look at the sky. You're free to look at the ship you just came out of. You're free to look at the trench it plowed into the earth as it crashed. You're free to swim in the little lake nearby. You can jump off a cliff down into the bigger lake that has a giant waterfall coming down. You're also free to explore the collection of small huts nearby your crash site. Because, again, Unreal has these details in its wide open areas that are more than just blank landscape. Beyond that, there's a point way later in the game where you come across an alien warehouse, and you see the same supply crates in this warehouse that were on the ship you crashed in the beginning of the game. The aliens have gone back and started salvaging your equipment, the human gear, and Halo doesn't have anything like that. These aliens come to this one dropship. And that's another thing that we talked about. We're supposed to be scattered all across this ring, just barely scraping by, setting up various bases, but we never see any of it.
So it's funny, everything that you've just said, because I actually remember in Halo 3, it was a point in the marketing that they were giving the enemies incidental behavior that they would do, right? So they weren't just waiting around to be shot. That was in Halo 3. They were talking about that, right? The level Halo, again, it epitomizes it, because you can see where they tried to do that, where you come across the scattered Marines. There's the rocky area where they've taken up the high ground, which, that's fair. There's a guy with a sniper up there.
Sure.
And there's the weird plasma blasting building that does nothing, that they've taken shelter underneath. And then the other guys are just at the top of a valley. So they tried to do that with the Marine, but the Covenant are either not present or just standing around when you get there. And then they bust them in on the dropships, the whatever they're called, spirits. The few enemies that you find are just standing there. They're not creating a picket to encircle the Marines. They're not currently assaulting them in that one area where they're under the big plasma blaster. It kind of looks like the Covenant are laying siege to the underground marines, but that's only because the entrance to the area is so close to the enemy that they immediately start shooting you. So you don't really get to see them just standing there like you do in the valley or the rocky area.
The other thing about that is, you do that for these marines once.
Yeah.
Okay, you do it 3 times in that level, but like, in the game, you do that once. Yeah. Where did those marines go? Why don't we have a base set up that we take them to, and then... I'm not asking for like a mission hub or anything like that. I'm not asking for this to turn into an RPG, but why wasn't there a level? We talked about this in the multiplayer video when we were like, what could any of these multiplayer levels have been? Why weren't any of these places where humans have taken shelter and holed up? Walking through this game, all I can see are missed opportunities. And you were saying with the dropping in of the enemies, I've heard praise from multiple sources about that, because like, oh, it's not like those other lame games where they just get teleported in.
That might have been true in the 90s, but Halo was not released in the 90s.
It may as well have been. but the thing is, like, if 10 imps are teleported in to a room in Doom, how is that functionally different than 10 grunts being dropped in Halo? They're still being brought in from somewhere that was not already extant. You didn't have a chance to fight them before, and now they are here. Like, yeah, it's thematically appropriate that they're being flown in by dropship because they're space aliens with spaceships, but if they had access to teleportation technology, then them being warped in would be equally as thematic. But what if, let's throw some ideas around, some not terribly complicated ideas. What if maybe the Red Elites have the ability to call in a dropship, and you gotta kill them before they do? There you go. Target prioritization. Changing battlefield. You think that would be really hard and impossible to do? Let me tell you about a little game called Metal Gear Solid 2, released like half a year after Halo, where certain enemies equipped with radios would call in for backup if you did not neutralize them or shoot out their radio.
I mean, hell, the Archviles in Doom, if we want to keep going back to that, you gotta shoot them, or enemies get back up.
There are those, like, radio terminals that are literally the only Covenant prop in Halo 1.
Mm-hmm.
What if a Red Elite could run over to that, type in some stuff, and then, like, 10 seconds later a dropship came in?
And that's the thing, is that if you want to talk about verisimilitude and, like, oh, you know, the enemies don't just teleport in, they dropship in and stuff like that, it's like, well, why don't we see the Covenant being more proactive about exterminating the humans on the ring? We never see them encircling, the ships never do strafing runs on them. Like, what if the Spirits came along and just started fucking firebombing Marine positions? You could do that with assets that exist in the game already. We never see the Covenant do anything in Halo 1 except exist already or get flown in by dropship. And then they deploy armor in the Assault on the Control Room stage. They use the Wraiths and they use the Ghosts. But that's the big vehicle stage. That's the only real time you'll see anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there even Ghosts on Silent Cartographer?
No.
There aren't.
No.
There's just the Warthogs that get dropped in. So that's the thing, is that everything is very self-contained with the Covenant.
It's very obvious that the game is waiting for you.
Yes.
It's really obvious that not only is the game waiting for you, but the story is as well. It's waiting for you to show up so that the director can say action, and the set pieces can play themselves out. And even when things do happen off screen without our direct involvement or observation, we still don't really know how they happened. We're just told that they did and we have to deal with it now. It feels very arbitrary and like it could have not happened. It still feels very directed and not like something that would happen as part of a natural narrative.
And that's the thing, is that Halo gets so much praise for its verisimilitude, or it did at the time. But I'm gonna touch on why I think it was praised despite its obvious lack.
And that's why I spent so much time, both now and when we were playing, talking about and comparing Halo 1 to Unreal, because Unreal did all of the things that people say Halo did, and Halo didn't do them. And that's the thing with not just Unreal, but other games of the time, and why the 90s were spent, at least in the PC market, perfecting the FPS genre. And yes, I am claiming that the FPS genre was perfected in the late 90s. I don't think it's evolved terribly much since then.
I mean, the first real FPS came out swinging with Doom, and everything's been a backslide since.
So, this gets into a term that I hate, and it's something that Halo 1 is praised for? Question mark? I don't know if it's praised for this. The idea of the, quote, weapon sandbox. Fancy. I hate that term. I really do. I think it's something Bungie invented, and I find it very masturbatory, because it's not fundamentally different than anything else in any other game.
So you could make the claim about the weapon sandbox if there were more than, say, 6 weapons?
Yeah, that's another thing. The weapon progression in Halo 1 is identical to, drumroll please, 1993's Doom. You get a pistol, then you get a shotgun, then you get an automatic weapon, then you get a rocket launcher, then you get an automatic weapon that fires projectiles instead of hit scan. Oh, it looks like Halo has a sniper rifle too. And that's another thing about Halo 1 and its arsenal. It's so boring, because you do just have all these human weapons you've been playing with in video games for 8 years up until that point. 9 if you really want to count, like, Wolfenstein. But then, like, okay, so we have this alien faction, and their weapons get to be like crazy space magic, right? No, you get a projectile pistol, a projectile assault rifle, and a different projectile assault rifle. And it's like, one, the plasma pistol, we covered this in the Let's Play, it's just the dispersion pistol from Unreal. It's the exact same weapon. The plasma rifle is the plasma rifle from Doom, and the Needler, arguably Halo 1's most creative weapon. So you know how I talked about Niven a lot?
Yes.
So I forget the exact story it debuted in, but it was absolutely sometime in the 90s. There's a weapon called a Strakacker. It's up on screen. This is a gun that fired a shower of Teflon needles. So, Bungie, showing the most creativity they've had stealing from Niven thus far, turned it into energy and gave it homing and also like an explosion if you get enough of them in somebody. But also the Needler in Halo 1 fucking sucks. It's useless.
It's interesting because looking at the series as a whole, which we're doing, so I can now appeal forward and backwards freely, and you can't stop me. They even went out of their way to retroactively justify weapons. So in Halo 2, they gave the plasma pistol an EMP effect, or was that 3?
I can never remember. They all just blend together.
I think it was 2, where they started with the gravity pistol having the EMP effect, where it disabled vehicle, which is not something it did in 1, which is what we're talking about, the first game of the series. So they went back and looked at the arsenal, and they tried to justify how samey the weapons were.
Which,
right?
Hey, kudos. Absolutely, they did one thing. Cool.
When you look at every aspect of Halo 1, the plot, the gameplay, the maps, the setting, the universe that the game is set in, when you look at all of it, right, and you look real closely, the skeleton of something is there. And there's just the faintest whiff that something could have been on the skeleton. But it's just, there's nothing on that skeleton. It's just skin. It's just skin and sun-bleached bone in a sandy desert canyon.
Yeah, and that's another reason I think that it's such a weird thing as far as the things they were trying, because they never tried anything like Halo 1 again.
Yeah, it's was funny because gameplay-wise, like, they did expand on things. They did iterate on things slightly, and they let you use some things that they planned to let you use in Halo 1. The story mostly is the biggest departure, because we have gone from a story about a guy that crashes on a weird space circle and kills a bunch of aliens to this now heroic narrative that paints our characters as mythic figures. The Chief is now important. You get the moment where you're walking past the Marines in New Mombasa and they're like, oh, it's a Spartan, no way, right? You get the suddenly important character of the Arbiter, who is alluded to the fact that he was one of the ship commanders in Halo 1. He is now branded a heretic and becomes the Arbiter. We're creating the Arbiter, the Master Chief. These definitive singularities within the setting that push things into motion and drive forward the story and the conflict. We're given a cast of characters outside of, like, Captain Keyes and Cortana.
Specifically, we're actually given characters. Now, Master Chief, I don't think, still qualifies as a character, considering he says less in this game than he did in the first one, and that already wasn't a lot.
He's a character insofar as he is talked about by others. He exists within the setting.
He sure is. I said as much. I don't dislike Halo 2. It is my favorite of the original 3 by far. But the things it does differently are not just in its presentation, but also in its design, because we trade the wide open areas for very narrow and highly curated combat encounters. Instead of taking what they started with, which was these big open areas with nothing in them, and putting things in them, they were like, okay, no, that's way too much work. We need to scale it down and make sure that no one ever has a chance to get lost. We have to make sure that you can't go too far to the left or right. You always have to keep going forward through our story. And it's very weird, because as much as I do actually like Halo 2, I don't think that turning it into the same kind of game that everything else was around that time helped it at all. I think if Halo 2 had been an actual mechanical sequel to Halo 1, again, expanding on the big open areas, etc., etc., I think the franchise going forward would have actually been something very unique and special. As it stands, this is just kind of like science fiction Call of Duty. Pretty well presented sci-fi Call of Duty, but not actually anything different.
It's funny, because as we relate the games to each other, which we're allowed to do now, when I said Halo 1 felt like a prototype, and you said tech demo, Halo 2 feels like the point mechanically and story-wise where the series should have started. It's confined, but you get a couple of vehicle rampage sections. The core arsenal of weapons have a bit more definition that separates them from each other. There is a cast of characters with a narrative that moves forward. It feels like a finished version of what Halo 1 should have been, where a director stepped in and said, okay, this isn't working, do this. In a lot of ways, to me, Halo 2 is like the actual first game of the series, where they built off of Halo 2, whereas Halo 1 was just the prototype. Halo 1 was the Halo 0, right?
See, you and I are definitely differing in this, because while I understand what you're saying about that, I'm still holding fast to my reading, which is like, this does feel like the first of a new game, but not necessarily what Halo 1 attempted to promise.
No, that's the thing. When I say it feels like a starting point for the series, I don't mean that it did what Halo 1 wanted to do. What I mean is that it mechanically, because of the way it's confined, it feels like where the series should have started instead of the half-finished ambition of 1.
Sure.
We should have gotten something like Halo 2, and then the next game should have been like Halo 1, but obviously finished and expanded upon.
Yeah, starting small, going bigger, which is, as it stands, you start big, and you give people these expectations, and they're like, oh, cool, I wonder how this is going to be followed up in the next game, and it turns out, not at all.
So Halo 2 is Halo as a series is very odd if you look at it from every angle. The development was chaos for every game. The developers are this anomaly of being some deeply entrenched, tight-knit group of people, programmers and artists and animators, and yet they turn out products that feel like student projects, laughably unfinished in some aspects. I'm going to keep appealing to that fucking box room at the end of the last level in Pillar of Autumn.
And this is kind of dipping back into Halo 1, but I have heard from a number of people actually that claim to be massive fans of Halo, cutting Halo 1 a lot of slack because, well, yeah, it was Bungie's first game.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. They were professional developers with 5 games under their belt. The 3 marathons, Oni, and that other one that no one ever remembers.
It's just so bizarre. And Halo 2, like I said, it feels like a starting point. It feels like they had a stronger direction going in, right? They had a better idea of what they were dealing with tech-wise. They put together, they were trying to tell a story. They were more directed, more focused. They looked at a lot of the things that seemed superfluous in the first game and gave them purpose. Instead of having you rely on med packs, they made the regenerating shields the be-all, end-all. And they just gave you like a small health pool that slowly regenerates.
Yeah, which I still don't agree with. I don't think that was the right move.
I don't think that was the right move either, but that's what they did.
Well, again, it was just like the design of the world. It was Bungie falling prey to what other people were doing. They were following at the heels of the people who were trying to copy them. They immediately went back to being non-entities. They tried to innovate once, got scared of mild success, and tried to copy their own imitators. It's bizarre.
But then you take outside information as well, and we know that they tried to be ambitious with Halo 2. There was a lot they wanted to do. They were trying to really push the visuals and the environments, and they were trying to really deliver something that was like a home run in terms of presentation. But a lot of the stuff that they were doing didn't work on the hardware that it was being produced for. Halo 2 is a game that is cobbled together with string and shoelaces. It breaks at the slightest poke. You can escape the bounds of pretty much every map in the campaign easily.
And even just casually playing, like, go rewatch our playthrough. We break some triggers.
Yeah.
Just by playing.
Yes. There are enemies and weapons that are on the disc. The Flood Juggernauts fucking have spawn triggers, and they just turn them all off because they couldn't finish them in time.
That's not unique to Bungie.
No,
but it is pretty damning. Especially considering the fact that there were actually 2 other Covenant weapons in Halo 1, again going back. The Fuel Rod Gun and the Energy Sword. Now, while we were playing Halo 1, Skell, I think you brought this up, you brought this to my attention. The first trailer for Halo 1 showed Master Chief using an energy sword.
Correct.
It was the big trailer ending applause moment, and they didn't put it in the game.
Yep.
The Fuel Rod Gun, it was up to Gearbox. Gearbox, who did the PC port, were the ones who finished that weapon and put it in multiplayer.
Yep. And if you look at Halo 2, a lot of the E3 demos that are famous for being complete smoke and mirrors, Bungie devs are quoted as being like, man, that was so nothing, right? Like, they threw that together. It was all scripted. If you looked at it from a different angle, unpainted wood, plywood, and fucking rope, right? Like,
yeah.
And yet they created a final product that was a facsimile of what they intended. If you look at the Metropolis demos that they showed off at E3 compared to the final game, it's insane to think that they were going to go that hard the disparity in knowledge, where they were building this big thing, and then they were like, yeah, but the hardware can't do it, man. Halo is definitely, on the development side, a franchise of ambition for at least the first two. And then the elephant in the room is getting closer. They suffered from their own success, and they just started resting on their laurels.
It's weird because I know people love Halo 1, but Halo 1 is so bare bones, and Halo 2 is it is way meatier. But yeah, looking at the development process, how weren't they crucified? Like, how did people let them get away with this?
So the answer, my friend, is that people, for the most part, right, obviously there are the fanboys, and we've talked about all that, but the answer is people loved the multiplayer.
I guess.
The thing is that people were playing the multiplayer, and that's what they cared about. We can talk about the story and the campaign diehards, but ultimately the success of Halo is, and we're getting closer and closer to the elephant in the room, it's not just the multiplayer, but ultimately the multiplayer is one of the biggest factors in its success.
God, and it's so wild, because I have opinions about Halo's multiplayer.
We could do a whole other video on the multiplayer. Anyway, focusing back down onto Halo 2.
Yeah, focusing... Halo 2, again, it is my favorite of the three. I think the story it tells, it's as derivative as I said in the series, but I think there's at least something, rather than occasionally being given a couple lines of like, the Covenant think, or Keys said.
And yeah.
The story's better, the gameplay... See, I say Halo 2 is my favorite of the original three, but I don't actually, like, put it up there with one of my favorite games. It's, you know, there's so many levels that end with standing in a box and killing enemies until they let you stop.
So, Halo 2 is a game that I would describe as fine.
I think most of my praise about Halo 2 actually comes from in comparison to Halo 1. And it's just like the addition of the drones and the brutes did so much for the encounter design possibilities in that game. The addition of the Covenant Carbine, while not in keeping with the dynamic that Halo 1 set up, again, see argument about hit scan versus projectile weapons and your shields versus player health, it did something. There's a new threat in combat to look out for.
If we go back to talking about the game being rushed out, another big part of the things that people remember is a result of the game not being balanced or finely tuned, right? Look at how fast the Wraith can fire, or the Gauss Warthog's damage output, or the fact that enemies driving a Wraith have the turrets to keep you off of them, but you don't have the same thing.
You sure don't.
The game's weapon balance it's crazy.
Oh, it's
right?
terrible,
like,
and you know why?
It's absolutely insanity.
You know why it's terrible?
Yeah, why is it terrible?
It's because they introduced the battle rifle, and it ruined Halo.
Yeah?
See, I'm not going to talk about multiplayer. But, in multiplayer, there's this thing called, don't give your players the best weapon when they spawn.
Yeah.
And this translates to the single-player campaign. You could dual-wield, and you might even have to in some areas, because you'll run out of ammo for your battle rifle. Because you'll always be looking for a battle rifle first, because it's the best weapon. It's accurate at any range you're going to interact with enemies in the campaign, because the areas are so small. It's faster firing than the carbine.
And the sniper rifle.
It fires 3 bullets at once. It's more accurate than the SMG up close. It's more damaging than the SMG. Like, they added the SMGs and took away the assault rifle and added the battle rifle. There is no reason to use the dual SMGs because the battle rifle out DPSs it. It just deals more damage faster than 2 SMGs. It deals more damage faster than plasma rifles, than plasma pistols, than the shotgun.
Oh, I have such venom for the Halo 2 shotgun. But the thing is that the battle rifle actually creates this really weird thing in the game balance where if you have a plasma pistol and a battle rifle, because you can only hold two weapons, if you have a plasma pistol and a battle rifle, you have everything you need to handle every situation you encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Because enemies with shields, you plasma pistol them, and then the battle rifle takes care of the rest. Long distance enemies, battle rifle. And it's like, oh, but what about vehicles, rocket launchers? Like, no, you can board vehicles. Doesn't matter. Board a vehicle. You've got everything you need. Worst case scenario, use your grenades. If you've got the battle rifle and a plasma pistol, you don't need other weapons. And that is like a fucking... Like, if you're looking at game design from a balance perspective, that is a nightmare, right? That is the first thing that gets flagged and is like, you need to fucking change this because it breaks the game.
It's something called dominant strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want your players to find the dominant strategy because it will make balancing your game hinge upon, well, they're going to be using the dominant strategy, so we got to ramp up difficulty, I guess, which makes it miserable for anybody not using the dominant strategy. What you don't want to do is give your players one half of the dominant strategy by default. That's a bad idea.
Yeah. And somehow, with regards to Halo, it is a lesson that people keep learning. 343 in the title update matchmaking, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we keep dipping back into the multiplayer, and it's crazy. Like, the multiplayer is such a big part of Halo's legacy, and it really started with 2. And I just want to point out that that's wild, because, like, we're talking about a period where net play on console was like you needed an external adapter for the PS2.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Dreamcast even have net play? It did, because of PSO. It did, right. But that's the thing, is it's like you're connecting to dial-up modems.
Yeah.
Like, it's so crazy to think that that's such an enduring part of its legacy. And again, elephant in the room, here it's meandering this way. I'll touch on why it's such an enduring part, because again, the balance is just
terrible.
It's baffling.
And like, you might be like, well, hey, Gareth, what about the pistol from Halo 1? That's pretty broken too. It's like, yeah, it is. It also didn't fire as fast, was less accurate even at range, and you typically found less ammo for it. Like, it was also broken. No one's saying it wasn't. But making it into your actual main weapon wasn't the right move.
See, that's the thing. If you're using the pistol, it's fine, but the pistol is just so you can go and get a rocket launcher or a sniper rifle. It is so you can find a better weapon. You can trade up from a pistol. Anything that you pick up after holding a battle rifle is a trade down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless you're picking up one of the weapons that can kill in one hit, you should not be giving up the weapon that kills in 3 hits.
And the funny thing is that, so like the sword is something that people, talk, it's that instant kill melee.
Mm-hmm.
The sword gives you a lunge, and the lunge is pretty hilarious, and it leads to some shenanigans. But you can kill people instantly with a melee to the back, and if someone is coming at you with a sword in the open, your battle rifle is going to beat it, right? Like, the sword needs to take advantage of terrain to be good. You need to ambush people with that thing.
And that's a fine bit of weapon design. Like, sure, instant kill melee weapons have been a thing in multiplayer for a while at the time.
The battle rifle don't need that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Even if you have a battle rifle and you get ambushed by someone with a sword, there is a scenario where you hop over them and bash them in the back and they're dead.
Yeah.
Like, that... It is everything you need. You have your entire moveset if you're holding a battle rifle. It's so crazy. But we're harping on one weapon in Halo 2 when we've got an entire franchise to talk about. So
we do. So let's bring it back to Halo 2 a little bit longer here. Halo 2's story, we talked about it. It's it's fine. Arbiter is just Tassadar, etc., etc. We've been there. But the actual story as presented is at least still understandable. It's very obvious what's happening for a little bit until the Zerg Overmind shows up.
So that's the thing. I actually want to talk about that. So with the story, Halo 2, you can see where the problem started because Halo 2 got hyped up to oblivion. The story is still earnest. It's still trying to tell you something, right? But the elements that would pollute the story going forward are definitely there as well. The Overmind is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I mention it more and more as the series went on. It's like he talks a lot, and every time he's finished speaking, you know nothing. In fact, you know less than you did before he started talking.
Mm-hmm. It's really wild because for as much screen time as the Flood get, they don't matter at all.
Ever.
They don't affect the story. You could be like, well, doesn't there's like a Flood Spore man, the head crab, kills one of the prophets. It's like, yeah, but that prophet dying doesn't actually do anything. Like, that wasn't a plot point later that particular prophet was dead.
I think the most important the Flood ever get to be is when they suddenly decide that they're important at the end of Halo 3.
Well, you know what then? We may as well go there. So, of course, Halo 2 ends famously and infamously 2/3 of the way through its own story. Nothing's been resolved, but they ran out of money and time. So it's time to finish the fight.
So now we come to, if you look back at the series, it's hilarious to hear me say this, because I'm quite optimistic going into Halo 3, but now we come to the low point of...
You were so bright-eyed going in. You're like, yeah, I love Halo 3. It's so fun.
And this is actually perfect, because you get to see what nostalgia does to your memory, right? Because I had nostalgia for Halo 3. I played it a lot, right? Going back to it and looking at it with a more critical eye, the whole thing falls apart. You can hear the realization as we go forward, and then it turns into resignation, and then by the end of it, we're just dragging it.
I felt a little bad doing that to you. I feel like I did that to you.
But here's the thing, you didn't really rob me of anything. Because, like, the pleasant memories that I had are still there. It's just that now I know they're built on a foundation of mud and manure.
So, let's start from the very beginning of Halo 3. We are about to finish the fight.
Well, actually, so the beginning of Halo 3 isn't even the end of Halo 2.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Halo 2 ends us with, like, oh, we gotta finish the fight. We proceed to not do that in Halo 3.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about Halo 3's opening is that it assumes a lot. And I don't know what their rationale was, because I'm going to go on like a really whirlwind jump ahead sort of thing, but the plot of Halo 3 does not start until you leave Earth again, which is the 7th level. Because you crash down on Earth, you go through a forest. Oh no, Johnson got kidnapped. Oh, he got him. He's fine. Okay, you go to a military base in the jungle, and they're like, "Oh, Master Chief, you're in the military base. We got to get you out of here right quick so you can go down to Voy." Oh no, we're being attacked. Chief, you got to get out of here. Like, yes, that was already established that I was going to be leaving as soon as I could. This is just me doing that, but now with guns. Then it's like, okay, go to Voy. Well, it's an entire level where you go down to Voy, and nothing story relevant happens. The game doesn't start until you go through the Arc portal 7 levels into the game. Because, of course, there's also the siege at the dock, right? You gotta fight the Scarab.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. With that in mind, knowing that nothing relevant to the game happens until halfway through the damn thing, why wasn't the opening level you fighting through the Eiffel Tower? Like, I understand that the whole point is that the Prophet of Gumption, is he? I don't know. I forget. The Prophet of Gumption gets away, and he's still able to do his thing. You could just have him outsmart Master Chief, because here's the thing about the Prophet of Gumption, which is just what I'm calling him now. I don't care or know about him. I don't know why he's a bad guy. Like, he's an evil religious cult leader, which, okay, I hate those guys by default, but I don't know who he is as a character. Like, is he manipulative? Is he egotistical? I mean, I guess, I get, you can kind of glean that. Is he, does he enjoy being evil? Does he think that he is so put upon by the universe that he needs to do these things he's doing? Does he feel bad about what he's doing to the humans? He's like, I understand this is your home, but, etc., etc. No, we never see him until the end of the game where he dies.
There's a hologram. But here's the thing, even all of that aside, because we can talk about that later, he's actually technically the Arbiter's villain, right?
Yeah. Oh, that would have been great to put alongside a character with a secondary story like in Halo 2.
And we relentlessly mocked the fact that the Arbiter is now player 2. He's the palette swap chief.
They trade one line in the entire game. Here it is. What is it? More brutes? Worse.
There we go.
That's all they say to each other.
Yep.
And I know what you're gonna say, viewer. Yes, the Arbiter does in fact have more things to say, both to Master Chief and otherwise if you're playing the game single player.
Yeah.
Master Chief does not respond to any of it.
He can't. Arbiter's player 2. They took half of their story and trashed it because they had the idea to make player 2 a part of the setting by making it Arbiter instead of just a doppel chief.
I get that you wanted to keep them together because the whole this ring will make us brothers, religion, septimeter. But why don't you just have the same thing you did in Halo 2 with alternating levels focusing on different things, but just have Master Chief be there for Arbiter and Arbiter be there for Master Chief? Just why don't you go up to the shipmaster guy and he's like, oh, Arbiter, you must do a thing. Master Chief can tag along too. And then you have another level where things get explained and it's just...
You can't do that because you can't make Master Chief player 2 because he's Jesus now. He's the most important thing in the setting. His luck is his defining trait that sets him apart from everyone in the setting.
Of all the things to steal from Ringworld,
yeah,
Tila Brown's luck,
yeah,
and knowing that they don't at all have the time to explore it in the way that Ringworld did. But to just kind of throw that in there is oh, what else can we steal from Ringworld? Oh, luck. Yeah, luck. And, oh my god, for it to come in the last game.
So that's the writing. The writing's a dumpster fire.
Oh, I've not even... Do you want to talk about the writing being a dumpster fire?
Go for it.
So, finish the fight, huh?
Yeah.
We don't, by the way.
No.
The Covenant finishes its own fight. It tears itself apart from the inside.
Yeah.
It's a victim of civil war. Master Chief, the UNSC, did nothing to bring about the end of the Prophet's reign.
Yeah.
You could argue that, didn't Master Chief kill Truth? The Halo 2 one? It's yes... And this is what happens. Prophet of Gumption uses his death as a way to instigate civil war, which ultimately is what brings down the Covenant. The Prophet of Gumption did not even cite the fact that Master Chief is the one that killed him, that the humans were the ones that killed him. Just the fact that he died and that the elites were unable to prevent it. Which means, if this little idiot had tripped and broken his neck getting in and out of his hover-round, the same thing would have happened. This guy could have choked on his spit and died. And the Prophet of Gumption would have been like, the elites could not protect him! The brutes must be brought in! Master Chief had no part in this story.
This is where we get into like the writing of the series overall, which I will gladly rag upon in but a moment.
Well, hey, yeah, there's a lot to say about the series overall, and we'll get there, but I'm not done with the story of this goddamn game quite yet, because you get done with all this arc shit, and you learn nothing, essentially. I'm reminded once again of the Marine going, look up in the sky, it's the Milky Way galaxy, and someone telling him to shut up. And then later on, a big revelation being that you're outside of the Milky Way galaxy. And it's just like, that's the caliber we're dealing with. But even further, the Flood. I could not shut up about this while we were playing, but the stakes in Halo 3 are just so abysmally low. Like, literally, they are in an abyss. They are so low, because you had Halo 1 suggest that the Covenant finding Earth would be the worst thing ever. In Halo 2, they found Earth and then left. In Halo 3, the Flood show up on Earth, and nobody cares about them. We leave. The Flood are on Earth, and we just say, peace out, good luck, and when we come back at the end of the game, everything's fine. From what we can see of the memorial, everything's fine. And the Overmind. When he shows up, so he shows up randomly in the level where you're going to kill the Prophet of Gumption.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, we must fight together now. Okay, and then you run down a hallway, and I guess the Prophet dies or something. And then he's like, I'm actually evil again. Mwah! It's like, what is being accomplished here? Just like in Halo 2, he comes on screen to say a lot of words at you. And I think this is what happened. I think somebody, the head writer at Bungie, once heard somebody say, quote, words have meaning. They understood this as they could write something and it would intrinsically gain meaning. This is not true. You can't just create a sentence and have it mean something. You have to put thought into it. And the shit that the Overmind rambles about on end throughout the entire, well, I guess like the second half of the game, doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. At all.
It's all set up. They never pay off. The Overmind just says things at you and none of it means anything.
I'd argue that it's not even set up. Because setup implies that you plan to go somewhere, and Halo 3 especially feels like it was written by the line.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like anybody thought any further than the single line they were writing, which is why, despite having a lot of people talking, nothing gets said. I mean, let's not forget to war.
Okay, but ma'am, I actually need combat deployments and like a battle assessment plan, because
So much gets said in Halo 3, but nothing is said. So much happens in Halo 3, but nothing happens. It's a game of things.
Yeah.
And they don't come together to make something.
So people like to talk about popcorn movies where you just turn your brain off and enjoy what's in front of you, right? But that is a term that gets thrown at everything. There are plenty of movies that people say, oh, it's just dumb popcorn, but they have substance. And that's why people enjoy them, even if they don't notice that it's there. Whereas Halo is very truly something with no substance. Things are happening and you are not expected to think about them beyond the line of dialogue saying that a thing is happening, right? Like the event that currently transpires, as soon as it's over, like a toddler without object permanence, you're expected to just forget.
Yeah, you're expected to go, oh, that was really cool. Okay, what's next?
Yes.
It's a series that is almost intentionally, it feels, built to not withstand critical thought. And I'm not even saying we're asking really tough literature dissective questions. I'm just like, what did this character add to the story? And Bungie can't answer me.
Because that's the thing, we talk about writing, and I'm sure that someone somewhere is going to watch and they're going to sigh every time we bring up writing, right? They're like, oh, why are they going to dive into all this Machiavelli, Hemingway, Edgar Allan Poe, Purple Prose stuff? And it's like, we haven't really done that, actually. We've really just sort of asked most basic, primitive, your first writing class questions that the teacher will ask you.
I'm not expecting unraveling the mysteries of this story to change my life. I just want to know what it is about.
It's about a guy who fights aliens on a space frisbee.
I think the question of what do the Halos do should be pretty easy for the series to answer. My mistake, it's actually the hardest. Because let's talk about the small setting. Here's the clip.
A tactical pulse will completely eradicate the local infestation.
Okay, you got that? Alright.
Yeah, okay.
In Halo 1, the line from Cortana is verbatim, it doesn't kill Flood, it kills their food.
Correct.
In Halo 2, the line from Guilty Spark is built by the Forerunners to eliminate potential Flood hosts. By the wording of both of these, I'm taking that as meaning that the Flood are immune to whatever sterilizing pulse the Halos themselves make. Because if killing what allows them to reproduce is the only way to deal with them, that means that it can't kill them. Otherwise, Cortana would have just said, it doesn't kill the Flood, it kills everything. And this is what the phrase, words have meaning, itself means. When Bungie wrote the words, it doesn't kill the Flood, I, the consumer of the information they've just given me, take that to mean, it doesn't kill the Flood. But then, in Halo 3, a tactical pulse will completely eliminate the local infestation. Not the human and Covenant life in the area that are potential hosts. No, the infestation. And you might be saying, oh, wait, no, maybe they realized it was a last-ditch desperate situation, and they knew that trying to fire the rings would cause the explosion that blew up the entire thing, and it would take care of everybody, even the Flood. But there's that whole bit where you fight Guilty Spark as a final boss fight because he wants to wait to fire the rings, and you say that's not possible? Like, he knows that firing the ring now will blow it up, and he wants that to not happen, so he has to be referring to a small setting that does in fact kill the Flood. So what do the Halos do? Answer me, Bungie.
So, And then, but here's the thing, now we get to pry away the facade, right? Because it's like, now we get to start asking, and these are still basic questions, right? If the Halos are weapons, why do they have biomes on them? Why do they have grass and trees and mountains?
Why do they need any of the bullshit that's on them?
Like, you don't grow lichen moss on your M4. Why would you? It doesn't need it. If anything, it makes it work worse.
The Ark, I understand, by its name. It may be Bungie and their multitude of mythological references finally named something that makes sense to me, a person.
No, because it gets better. And I pointed this out. Using the tactical pulse matters even less. Because here's the thing about the Ark. So the Flood need food. They need hosts. One is to assume that the spores cannot simply sit inert forever unless they are somehow preserved. So maybe they can fossilize or something like that. They enter some sort of dormant state. But they need food. They gotta eat to grow and be big, healthy boys. He goes through the portal, you're on the Ark. The Ark is outside of the Milky Way galaxy. The worst of it, the most of the Flood, they're now on the Ark outside of the Milky Way galaxy. Congratulations, the Flood problem has just solved itself. Because now all you gotta do is step back through the portal and turn it off.
Yeah, what if you just left? A thing that Master Chief himself has proven he is more than willing to do 2 games in a row now. He is perfectly okay with leaving problems to other people.
And it's like, oh, but it's the Ark and it's important and they could use to do what? Turn on the Halos and kill themselves and all the food? What do they do? If you step through the portal and turn it off without doing anything, they either have to stay on the Ark and starve to death, or they have to cross the fucking celestial void to get back to the Milky Way galaxy. If you can see the entire Milky Way galaxy up above you, do you want to know how far away you are from the Milky Way galaxy?
You're really far away.
So anyone who steps through that portal and leaves the Flood behind, their grandchildren's grandchildren will be dead before the Flood ever even see the first star of the Milky Way.
And, you know, if Halo 4 is to be believed, maybe we'll have evolved enough to resist them. Yeah, no, Halo 3's plot is one that falls apart the instant you ask a single question. You know, much in the same way that the finishing the fight with the Covenant was through no doing of your own, you also don't have to finish fighting the Flood.
You can just leave!
Yeah, it's just so bad. Like, again, I am not asking for every minute detail of this plot to be laid out in a nice orderly list. I'm just asking it to not crumble into dust when I ask anything.
Like, any capable writer would have looked at the scenario where the Flood portal through, and they would have said, okay, so now it's about turning off the teleporter.
Any competent writer would have looked at the ending of Halo 2 and been like, oh, that's where I start.
That's what I'm trying to illustrate, right? Is that there are so many points in the story that don't make sense, and not necessarily because they're badly written. They are, but not because they're badly written, but because the writers decided to make up and solve a new problem instead of solving the problem that already exists, utilizing the elements of the story that are already there. And that speaks of either complacency from the writer, it doesn't matter, no one will notice, or inexperience of the writer. I want to gamble on the former.
Oh, absolutely, because as I pointed out in the very first video for Halo 3, the plot and, like, level design follows the exact same progression that Halo 2 did. You just do the same events in mostly the same order. Yeah. You escape a place, you go down a highway, fight through a city, go through a portal, fight on a Forerunner planet world thing, and then fight a prophet. It's the same game. At the top of my notes for Halo 3, I wrote, anybody who likes this game should be embarrassed. And maybe that's a bit harsh, but this is the internet, so I'm standing by it.
If we refine that statement to anyone who likes the story of this game should be embarrassed, that's absolutely correct. Hey, look, it's ODST.
Oh, cool. Yeah, ODST. You know, it seems like they actually tried to make a video game this time.
Yeah. It's an interesting experiment. They could have gone crazier in a lot of ways, but now we get to tie back to Halo 2 versus Halo 1. ODST to me feels like where they progressed from Halo 1 mechanically. In a few ways, because ODST tries to create the illusion of like an open world that you can explore. So you get the city of New Mombasa, and you can explore. You can find cool stuff, weapons, audio logs. You can go to different areas. You can technically do the missions out of chronological order.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I said as much when we were playing. I felt that ODST is a bunch of, like, cool experiments they should have done in Halo 3 with, like, area design and the amount of enemies and the amount of vehicles in play.
Yeah.
But the thing about the open world section is I don't actually know what it added.
It didn't. It added gameplay.
Did it? Because here's the thing. I don't think Rookie, the character of Rookie, is necessary for this story. I feel like this was a pretty conventional first-person shooter, single-player game where you played, swapping between maybe 3 playable characters that was then split up and turned into something when they realized the game was really short.
So, yes, the Rookie stuff is padding, but I will actually argue that the open world segments do something for the Halo games that the Halo games have not done previously. And that is, in the first Halo game, we are told, but not shown, that the Covenant conflict with the humans is like apocalyptic, overmatched, overbearing. The humans stand no chance against the Covenant. They're better. They're winning. We're losing. And the open world segments do a very good job of reinforcing the human cost of such a conflict. You walk through the rainy streets of New Mombasa, and I know you do that in the linear stages, but when you're doing it alone, we obviously cooperatively, there was 2 of us, but when you're doing it alone, when you're going through the ruined streets and you're seeing the trashed cars and the wrecked bus stops, it shows you what we have previously only been told, which is the Covenant are
people do not is get to the data hive, but that could have just been Buck.
It could have been anyone.
The whole crawling through the streets searching for clues isn't actually that. It's kind of just following a waypoint.
Hey, you want to break ground for this sci-fi shooter franchise? You could have played as Dare and made it to the data hive first.
Yeah.
But you can't play as a girl. Girls are stinky. So
it's just that, like, everything that happens is already so disconnected.
Yeah.
It's obvious from a gameplay standpoint that, again, these are just, like, cool experiments that they were trying out.
Yes.
Which, again, maybe should have made it into Halo 3. But there's so little connective tissue, it's really obvious that the city segments is just, like, literally hopping from one experiment to the next. But there's no reason why it couldn't have been a more traditional linear narrative. Especially considering that so many of these individual levels where you play as the other ODST people end with you on your way to somewhere else.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's weird. I have very weird feelings about ODST. Like, I'm mostly neutral on it. Like, I thought it was fun, but I don't know what it accomplished. And honestly, I don't enjoy playing it.
I can understand why. I'm fine with it, but I have a higher tolerance to certain things than you do when it comes to game design.
Yes. It's just like, from the outset, the game is super blurry if you're not using your detective vision.
Mm-hmm.
Which, first of all, is just annoying to look at. Second of all, detective mode ruins the art direction. It's weird. And then, like, whenever you get shot, even a little bit, which happens a lot in an FPS, you have to hear your current player character grunt and groan in pain for like 30 seconds. And then, like, the screen flashes red. It's like, oh my god, why is this happening?
So, I remember in the lead up to the release of ODST hearing people talk about how they wanted to reinforce that you're not superhero, Superman, Jesus, Master Chief. They wanted to make you feel like you're just a regular guy. So I can imagine some guy sitting in a room coding that over a day and then patting himself on the back when everyone was like, yeah, this is great. Obviously, they were more interested in that than they were in, like, you know, how it would feel minute to minute playing the game. Which is funny because they talk about wanting to make you feel like a regular guy, but you still have shields.
You still have shields. You still do the same things that you've been doing as Master Chief. Like, you can climb onto an armored tank and punch it to death with your bare fist, which actually makes you stronger than Master Chief, considering he wears armored gloves and you have fingerless leather ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, this is why I think this should have been Halo 3. They should have taken the time to put these experiments into Halo 3, because Halo 3's gameplay is stale as old crackers, and this is trying stuff, but doesn't make any sense for, like, a regular Joe in a cool helmet to be doing.
No. But hey, they wanted to get long-time alumni, the guy from Castle, into one of their games as a leading man, so here he is.
The gynecologist from Desperate Housewives.
Yeah, that guy. So...
Yeah, it's just like... Also, the aggressive tutorialization that lasts half the game, telling you outright how to kill certain enemies. Like, oh, Buck, you can't fight that jackal straight on. You gotta find a plasma weapon and break its shield. Then it'll be vulnerable.
I have a theory, and that is that because ODST is a spin-off, they expected it to be a lot of people jumping into this franchise for the first time with it. That is my theory. I don't know why they would think that, because everybody just bought Halo 3. The thing there is that there's also the possibility that ODST is the offcuts of 3 that they polished up and finished. Right?
I mean, that's a very real thing that happens with expansion packs all the time.
Yeah. So that is definitely possible. So it sits in a weird place, and honestly, I could not speak more about it without doing more research on its development and the intent of the developers.
Sure.
Looking at it from the exterior, I think it was a fun set of experiments, and I think the open world stuff, pseudo open world, it's not really open world, it's a framing device, but it's a glorified mission select menu, right? But
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I feel like it is a step closer to iterating on Halo 1 than any of the other games in the franchise.
That's fair. Yeah, but I will say one more thing about ODST. What happens in ODST? Like, what do you accomplish?
Well, an engineer, a Covenant engineer, which is showing up for the first time ever, gets captured, and it tells the UNSC about the portal under Kilimanjaro.
Okay. And this game came out after Halo 3?
Correct.
So you see, the problem is that the information you learn in ODST doesn't matter because Halo 3 had already been made.
Yes. That is correct.
It's very weird. This game's really weird that
You know what else is weird about ODST?
What's that?
Its obsession with referencing a certain divine comedy.
Yeah, so let's play a game called How Many Dante's Inferno References Can You Count?
Oh boy, here we go.
The ODSTs are called Hell Jumpers. That one's free.
Virgil is your guide through the city.
I still can't believe I stopped myself from making a reference. I had it all planned out. I was gonna be like, alright, Skell, be my Virgil as you guide me through this jump into hell with the ODSTs. And I was like, no, that's stupid. Don't say that. And then inputting password, Virgil, oh, fuck off!
So here's the thing. You're lucky you dodged a bullet there, because then if you'd have opened that can of worms, all I would have done was reference the Devil May Cry franchise.
Oh, that's fair.
But yeah.
There are 9 missions. 1 for each circle of hell.
Sadie's dad works on sub-level 9, though, of the computer place.
Yeah, sub-level 9. Oh, get it? And maybe most... I don't want to say clever. I don't want to accuse Bungie of being clever. I don't think they deserve it. But most interpretive of the source material. How about that? The story is literally about an alien betraying the faction that it works for, because of course the 9th level of Inferno is for traitors. However, the fact that the engineers are a slave race forced at gunpoint and with suicide vests to be in the Covenant doesn't really thematically connect.
What about the fact that when you're descending through the various sub-levels at the end, it's all cold and icy and frozen?
God, yup.
Yeah, right. Which is a fun environmental detail, but come on, that's definitely a deliberate, wink at the Divine Comedy.
We all know that the only books Halo superfans read are the Halo books.
I'm honestly surprised Buck's name isn't Dante.
Right? It should be Dante Buck.
Oh, God.
Or Dante, quote, Buck Alighieri. Maybe the rookie is like, oh, rookie, huh? It's gonna be hell down there. Got your copy of the Divine Comedy with you?
The rookie's name. We could have found out their name at the very end was Dante, right?
Yeah, it was yeah. Oh god, it's like some Italian guy just got put in our squad. Dan something.
But that's Bungie being self-indulgent isn't exactly new though, right? So
no, they love their mythological references that don't make any goddamn sense.
We'll talk about that.
Oh, yes, we will.
But that's... Honestly, there's not much more we can really talk about with ODST.
No, not really. It's a short game.
Aside from the hilarious attempts at, character writing that come off as more genuine and more present than anything in the game before it, but are still really hammy, right? They are...
I still want to know what the hell was up with their animations.
So, I think the animations are just an extension of the delivery, which is an extension of the writing, because Bungie, so with Dare and Buck, Bungie have a brick with romance written on it, and they are cracking your skull open.
They've tied it to a rope, and they're swinging it around the room.
There's not much to go on about with ODST, because there's not much of ODST, really.
Yeah, it was fun. I like the individual missions that aren't wandering around the city, but I hate interacting with them because every time I get shot, I have to listen to...
I don't know. Maybe someone will fix it with mods.
If only.
So that's ODST.
Yeah,
in
that was
a shell,
ODST.
not really.
Now it's time for
Reach.
Reach, which is my favorite Halo game.
Reach is where we actually see a definitive, actual iteration on the formula, the blueprint that Halo 1 laid out.
Mm-hmm.
So they took all the things they wanted to do in 1,
Well,
and they delivered. Well, not all. They took most.
We'll talk about the things they wanted to do in Halo 1.
Okay, they took things that they wanted to do, and they
with the planet of Reach, they created a very well realized and instantly believable world where people live, where there's a variety of environments, where there's large open areas with things to find outside of the direct line through the narrative, and where there's a lot of enemies on screen at the same time, a lot of vehicles on screen. I think Halo Reach, mechanically and design-wise, is pretty clearly the culmination and the best realization of everything they had been trying for a decade.
I would agree with that. I would. I think overall it's the best Halo game if you look at it as a complete package. And I think that something that actually really helped them was having a narrative that is built to be self-contained.
Yes. Like I said when we were playing, I think that Reach works best if you just mentally delete the word Halo from the title.
Yeah. No, Reach is pretty excellent that way.
Because if you play it as a standalone game, it's really good.
Yeah. It really is. And the funny thing is that you don't actually really need to know anything about the other games.
Not until the last 2 levels.
Okay, but that doesn't count because that's stupid. Don't worry about it. You want to talk about stories where the narrative, like the ultimate payoffs in narrative doesn't matter? Let's talk about Reach.
Yeah, and I understand the complaint about Reach that, like, oh, none of the characters are cool or good. And it's like, first of all, what series are you playing again? Because they haven't been good or cool yet. But 2, the characters aren't the point of the story. The characters are there to experience the events that are being thrust upon them. It is an event-driven story, which is a real thing. Look at disaster movies.
Yeah. But funnily enough, the characters in Halo Reach actually show don't tell is important. They show something about themselves that we have only been told about previously. Not even the characters in ODST displayed this as a character trait within the game. The squad in Reach care about each other, and we see that.
Yeah. They all play their parts very well. They are just archetypes. They are not particularly special archetypes. You can find these archetypes in any piece of media, across any style of media, and these are done well.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that, like, when one of them dies, the others react in a way that you can see is, like, it changes their attitude, right?
It changes their attitude, it changes how they approach problems, because you see when Kat dies, people talk about how doing certain things would be a lot easier if they still had their tech expert.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily affect gameplay, but you can at least assume from them saying that the reason you have to fight all these enemies is because you can't go through a door fast enough. Which is like, it's a very little bit, but it's more than we ever had.
Look at George sacrificing himself. Notice how the real tipping point on the game's difficulty scale is after George exits the story. And he's the big, tough, well-armed, well-armored guy, right? Who is also nice and able to resolve conflict.
Yeah.
The team becomes more combative. They're more harsh on each other, especially their failings. when you interact with people, it's a lot more curt and cut off. And yeah, you don't have a good example is that when you get in one of the pickup trucks that dot the landscape, when George is around, he'll get in the back and use his big turret gun like a warthog turret, and you can't do that anymore when he's dead.
Yeah,
because he's not fucking there,
and,
right?
And also, just narratively, after the mission, after Long Night of Solace, after George dies, the story kind of gets almost a soft reset with Exodus. You start like at half health with only a pistol, very little ammo, and you don't see another human character alive until you meet up with a random squad of Marines. You're forced to be alone for the first time in the game. And it's just a little bit of gameplay that adds to the narrative.
Yeah.
And again, this is nothing groundbreaking. Any other game you can point to and be like, yeah, it's like this. But for it to come from Bungie, who's, again, in Halo 3, their idea of dealing with an apocalypse-level event was, we'll let other people deal with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's something. It is something. It's anything at all.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people will cluck their tongues when I talk about the characterization of Emil, because there isn't really characterization of Emil in terms of, like, what he wants or who he is.
Yeah,
but you actually...
He definitely gets the least amount of focus.
But you actually do see the most change in personality with Emil. Because at the start of the game, he will, like, joke at you harshly, right? He'll sort of, like, haze you, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a bit of a dick, but everyone keeps him in check. And by the end of the game, he's just hateful. All he wants to do is kill Covenant. He doesn't care if he lives or dies.
Yeah.
And that is a change, because at the start of the game, he is very much professional and working with the rest of the team. And by the end of the game, he's just angry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
As you lose more and more team members, it becomes more and more apparent that this is a situation where you are not going to succeed, right? And George dying at the halfway mark is absolutely the point where the game goes from, we're going to push them off Reach, to we have to get off of Reach.
Yeah. And that's what I like about the game. It's not big and bombastic and we have to save the universe every single level. Like, in Halo 3, even the random incidental stuff gets your swelling music and everything cool is happening forever. It's like, remember in Halo 1, in Silent Cartographer, where the main theme of the game with all the electric guitars kicks in as you're walking up some stairs? That's stupid. Like, the stakes keep... So, obviously, you know, the stakes keep getting lower, but Bungie thinks they're raising the stakes every single level, and it gets very tiring. And Reach is just like, yeah, every level kind of builds in scope, but what you're actually accomplishing just gets smaller and smaller. It goes from, like, think about Tip of the Spear, right? Tip of the Spear, you destroy this massive Covenant army encampment, you destroy these cloaking spires, you destroy a Corvette, it's amazing. What do you do in Exodus? You evacuate some people.
And now we get to tie back to when I talked about peaks and valleys in a story, right? This is an example of the lulls in the story, the valleys, being just as important as the peaks. It rises back up to where it's building to the sword base being important.
Yeah, and then it all kind of falls apart with the introduction.
It all kind of falls apart by the end, but the point is that it has distinct peaks and valleys in the story.
Yeah, no, it does. It absolutely does.
And building to the evacuation of the last ship leaving, the Pillar of Autumn. Mm-hmm. Which would be a cool, cap off and it's, because you know what the Pillar of Autumn means.
Yeah,
right?
The fact that it ends with the Pillar of Autumn launching is not my complaint with the end of Reach.
No,
my complaint is that Cortana's important.
Yes.
And my other complaint is, gameplay-wise, the final level has you pointedly be told to ignore a scarab, and then do a static defense thing ending with a turret section.
Yeah, it certainly was not great.
If I was in charge of Halo Reach, we talked about this, it needs 3 more levels, but also it needs a new ending level.
Yes, but that's the thing, is that they certainly utilized pacing and character, but they wove it into gameplay, and it shows a level of thought and care that previously has not been shown.
No, Halo Reach is literally a game unlike anything else Bungie had made prior in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very strong because of that. Yeah, that's another thing just about Reach. It feels like an exploration of the technical advancements of the 360 and the technical capabilities more than Halo 3 was.
Yeah?
Because again, Halo 3's levels were very small.
Yes.
And Halo Reach, even right out of the gate, the first level, you go a very long way.
Yep.
And it does not stop. And I think that really ties back into how it married gameplay and narrative in a way that the other games didn't, because they just either ran out of level or couldn't figure out enough things to put in the level. And Reach is finally, like, using all of the space it has available. It's a very well put together game. And I know people who have read the book about Reach don't like it, but just stop and think about everything we just said and realize that there's more to a game than being a direct carbon copy of something else. Especially in a series that's already a direct carbon copy of so much.
And ultimately, that's why we can heap praise on Reach, because it shows us what we want. When me and Reckon gripe about the series overall, what we want from the game is what Reach is giving us, right? It's answering narrative questions that anyone would reasonably ask. It's utilizing the gameplay elements that it has to their fullest in terms of weapons, vehicles, map design, enemies, enemy variety. Air quotes, enemy variety.
Well, it didn't take anything away. Except, I mean, I guess it did ditch the 2 different variations of hunters and the different variations of drones, which is, after playing ODST for the first time, I did kind of miss them, but it's not like they removed half the enemy roster.
Yeah, except for the flood, but that's no great loss.
You know what? Another reason I like Reach so much? No goddamn flood.
Yep.
I am sick of those guys, and I hope they never show back up. Infinite, please just don't. I know you will, but don't. Man.
Oh, I can't wait for this clip to play when we're playing Infinite. Hi, future Skeletor and Reckon.
Yeah, hi. If you're seeing this, it means we're really disappointed right now. Great.
Reach is definitely an example of everyone firing on all cylinders. It ain't perfect, but it's clear that everyone gave a shit when they made it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Speaking of breathing, allow me to sigh heavily as we move on to Halo 4.
So what is even left to say about Halo 4? That we didn't already scream into the heavens while playing it.
The story of Halo 4 is borderline incomprehensible. It's a spaghetti tangle of the loose threads left by the previous games.
I don't know, because the 2 main things in Halo 4's story, the Cortana rampancy thing and the digital devil sagas themselves, they weren't actually from any of the previous games. They were from the books.
They finally told us things about the Forerunners.
God, did they tell us things about the Forerunners. I'm not sure what they told us, but they told us a lot.
I never want to be told more things about the Forerunners.
Neither do I. Who looked at that script? and went, yes, this is good.
Someone with more ambition than you or me could ever comprehend, or an actual crazy person.
If anybody here hasn't seen it, I'm going to point you towards Halo 4 Episode 5-2 of the Let's Play series, where we just spend some time asking questions about literally 2 cutscenes from Mission 5 of Halo 4, and that basically covers our feelings towards the Forerunners in Halo 4.
The story of Halo 4 so thoroughly torpedoes itself. I can't even begin to, speculate at the motives of the writers. I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't understand what this game was trying to say, if it was trying to say anything at all. I don't understand where they wanted it to fit into the greater scope of the franchise. I don't understand this game. I don't. Even now, I have sat down and tried to think about it. I went to the Halo wiki and I read about Halo 4, and I still don't understand the story.
I've played Halo 4 probably half a dozen times now. And I played it in 2012 when it came out. I spent many hours staring at the footage as I edited it. I had to rewatch cutscenes to get, cleaner audio or something. I don't know what the second half of this game is about. Obviously, moment to moment, it stopped the bad man from using the bad thing, but a story is more than its individual moments. Same with Halo 3. And in this game, I don't understand the order in which events are supposed to have happened. They tell us a collection of things did happen, but it seems like every time they're brought up, they happened in a different order. And I don't know who I'm supposed to believe, and not in a cool Kaiser Soze unreliable narrator sort of way, but just I don't know what it wants me to consider important information.
So obviously they wanted to touch on the Forerunners. That was obviously a primary thing they wanted to do with the writing of the 4th entry of the game.
And you know what's wild about it? Is that it starts off just fine.
Yeah?
Getting Cortana back to Earth to defrag. I understand that. I don't like Cortana. I actively dislike Cortana as a character. I never liked her in Halo 1 or 2. 3 absolutely made me hate her, and I hated that she was shoehorned into Reach. But I was willing to go along with this game and be like, okay, let's fucking save Cortana, I guess.
So, initially Cortana was just a fun source of quips and random trivia, if we're looking at it objectively.
This cave is not a natural formation.
She wasn't really utilized for anything important. She would give you objectives in the first game. She would help you with your already stated objectives in the second game. But I think the most important thing she was ever really given to do was blow up High Charity, and she didn't.
She didn't. She could have prevented a large part of Halo 3 from taking place. But she didn't do the one thing that we left her on High Charity to do. So, what was the point?
If she had blown up on with the Halo ring in the first game and been replaced by anyone else talking to you over a radio, I don't think anyone would have noticed her missing in Halo 2 and onwards.
Oh yeah, probably not. I think this was a case, another case, of all of the external media poisoning the well. Yeah, in Halo 1 she was explicitly the ship's AI. Nothing else. The manual says so. If you don't trust the manual, then you don't care about these games, okay? Don't try to tell me you're on board with this series story if you're willing to disregard information given to you in the instruction manual. In Halo 1, Cortana is explicitly stated to be the Pillar of Autumn's shipboard AI. In Halo 2, she's like just hanging out with Master Chief now. Maybe she got transferred to the station that gets attacked, Cairo Station, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe she gets transferred there after the Pillar thing happened. Fine. Then why does Chief just have permission to have her?
Because she's important. So here's the thing about military strategy, I reckon. You've got an expensive to create and very limited in number super soldier. You've got an expensive to create and very limited in number AI that contains loads of strategic information and technical information. These are two very important assets to your military that can be utilized very effectively to help you fight a losing war. So clearly, what you need to do is put them both in the same place and then make that place the most dangerous parts of any actively ongoing conflict that arises.
But also make sure that it's as far away as possible from any location that would benefit from that strategic knowledge. But like in Halo 2, everyone's talking to her. Like Johnson talks to her. Why? Why are they on speaking terms? Again, Cortana should just be a military tool. She should be a piece of hardware that if the grunts interact with is on the end of like 7 million layers of protocol that she doesn't even have a tone of voice for them.
Reckon, are you advocating for the objectification of a female character?
I think I talked about this in another video. If she wants to be totally sapient AI to Master Chief and other higher-ups in the military, that makes sense. But to random grunts, they should be able to go to a terminal and be like, Cortana, what time is it? And she'll be like, it is 21:22 shipboard time.
Reckon, that sounds suspiciously like a certain digital assistant that has been made available to consumers of the...
I'm glad she's dead. I'm glad Halo 4 killed her.
Well, if nothing else, Halo 4 killed Cortana.
Except I saw the new Halo Infinite trailer, and apparently there's another one, so... Great! Can't wait. At least this one's wearing clothes. You know what, Skell? I have a bone to pick with Halo as a series, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but we're talking about Cortana, whatever. Okay, I've played some of the other Halo games. Some of those games have AIs in them. You know what those AIs do that Cortana doesn't? They wear clothes. Cortana's just a freaky nudist. Okay? That's weird. That's really weird. I don't like that. Add another point against Cortana doesn't wear clothes when it's clear that AIs have a concept of bodily shame.
See, you bring this up, right? And because we've been told that she's based off of Halsey's like neural layout, right? All I can think of is like, Dr. Halsey, I can understand that you're doing groundbreaking military research that will save humanity, but would you please put on some fucking pants?
I think better in the buff, Spartan.
Oh man, Halo 4 is like a Pandora's box of awful that just opens up all sorts of like just fun new ways to drag the series down.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't even know what to say about Halo 4. Like, as a game, it's fine. The areas are kind of small again, like in Halo 2, and there aren't as many weapons as there used to be, and the new enemies suck.
Yeah.
And the new weapons are just more boring reskins. There's no new actual alien weaponry whatsoever.
art direction wise, they were certainly ambitious with the visuals.
Too ambitious. Way too ambitious.
Why does he look like Voldemort? Why? Look at him!
Why
Look
do
at
all
this.
the guns have to be a million separate pieces that all wiggle differently?
Why does he look like Voldemort?
Like, as a video game, mechanically speaking, I think Halo 4 is perfectly acceptable. You can move and you can shoot, and there are vehicles, but what it loses from Reach, it does not make up in other places.
No. It's definitely, I hate to say this, but it's a step back.
It really is.
I know people like to be rope company good, number company bad. Here's the thing, 343, it is very clear that they care a lot, alright? Here's a piece of wisdom for you, if you're listening, Mr. Microsoft. Don't hire fans. It never works out. It's always a bad idea.
Yeah. I understand and can even commend 343 for wanting to bring some plot points from the books into the main story of the games, because there's a lot of shit in those books that is never brought up and may as well not exist. So, like, maybe there's something cool in there that could be made part of, like, the actual official primary media the series is known for. But you can't just bring it in and expect everybody to already know what you know. You have to explain the shit, too, and not just say the words. And, like, Halo 4 said a lot of words. It told its story very verbosely, but it said the wrong things constantly.
He downloads them so he can digistruct them so they can digivolve.
The mantle of responsibility going on like anybody knows what that is. Is it a philosophical concept? Is it a physical item like a relic or a trophy or a weapon? Forerunners love their weapons. Is it one of those? I don't know. The game didn't tell me.
He turned humans into cavemen, but he also turned them into robot mummies.
But he put them on the halos, but he fired the halos to kill the Flood, which he was killing with the mummies that he made out of the corrupted digi-souls of the people that he didn't turn into cavemen, but the composer can't put things back properly, which is why human digi-souls were the monsters, but then they put other creatures back just fine. They were going to repopulate the galaxy with the composer. What is happening?
Don't forget that humanity was actually the Forerunners' greatest enemy and kicked their ass super hard, and they had like a huge vicious war. But all of the humans that the Didact feeds into the Digistructor are super loyal to him. Unless they're supposed to be Forerunners, but we're told all the Prometheans are human, and they're shown to be Prometheans in that cutscene.
We are Forerunner, and the games have spent a decade alluding to the fact that it was us who built the rings.
But it was the Forerunners who are us, but not us.
Then why do the monitors give a shit about humans being there? And why didn't the Overmind say anything about us being there?
So I went onto the wiki to try and straighten this out, and it just becomes more confusing, because now we start talking about things like a precursor to the Forerunner race, and the Flood are the precursors, but the precursors hated the Forerunners and the humans or something. There's the Flood used a logic virus to destroy computers.
And if we weren't the Forerunners, then why was there a portal to their Ark on Earth if we didn't build the Ark? And then how did anybody get off the Ark if the halos went off? And how did Composer Digi... How? What?
And the Forerunners wiped themselves out, except for their greatest war criminal, who they kept in the Digistructor.
How did humans get A, off the Ark, or B, out of the Composer? Because either one should have been impossible if the Forerunners were dead.
Put the Librarian. Oh, and don't forget that evolution is a gradient that you can. It's your fucking gamma setting. Let's just turn up the evolution slider.
It's like hitting create similar face in Dark Souls until you get a Master Chief.
And then you're more evolved, so you can't be digistructed. So if evolved humanity can't be digistructed, how did we digistruct the humanity that was attacking the Forerunners that was more evolved than us?
He said that he devolved us after turning us into robo-zombie knights, but it shouldn't have been possible to do that until we were cavemen, but cavemen came after the robo-knights, zombie mummies, and then we lived on the Halos for a little bit, I guess, but then we were on Earth, actually, and... Stop!
It burns!
I'm sure that if I read 117 books, this will all make sense.
I can feel my neurons dying!
Okay. I admit, maybe we got a little bit lost there. Because while the terminals in this game are more related to the story than they were in Halo 3 or Reach, they still are not the story, which we've not actually talked that much about. So let's. Personal opinion, Halo 4 is really weird.
I could agree with that.
It's got two main plot points in the Cortana rampancy and Didact does stuff territories. But it doesn't juggle them very well, honestly. Because you wake up, Cortana's crazy, alright, let's find a way back to Earth. We can fix her, that's, Master Chief wants to fix her, cool. Short, sweet, and to the point. There's some weird new faction of Covenant that is attacking us, and hey, that's unexpected, and, that's some conflict. Okay, they're going to prevent us from getting back to Earth very easily. Alright, still got it. I'm still on board. Covenant wants something. Not a surprise, even lampshaded in the game. And then this guy called the Didact shows up, and he's like a forerunner. He gets to be the evil bad guy. He runs around, monologues at us, and throwing space magic and robot mummies. Okay. There are our players, right? Cortana, the new Covenant faction, this Didact guy, these Promethean people. Easy. We're all still on board, right?
I'm with you so far, just like I was at a certain point in the game.
Funny enough, though, that's not the real problem. That mission is not the problem. The problem is Cortana. And she's a problem because, other than going crazy, she doesn't really do anything. She's not, urging Master Chief to ignore her problems and fight the Didact, even if she knew what the loss of time could end up resulting in if she doesn't get back to Earth. She's not the one, testing his conviction to her. She just kind of appears and is like, oh, by the way, I gotta remind you, I'm going crazy, but it's okay, take your time fighting the Didact, we're just doing that now. Because, Master Chief starts the game ready to defy anyone and do anything to find a way back to Earth. That's all he cares about. But as soon as the Didact comes on stage, he's just happy to have someone new to shoot. Because he's given opportunities to go back to Earth, and he's like, no, I have to stay and fight the Didact. And, there's been zero conversation between Master Chief and Cortana about this. Again, she's not urging him to stay. He just decides that, okay, yeah, I'll do this instead of saving my friend, who I love now, I guess. Cortana doesn't represent some sort of ticking clock that has to be carefully balanced around saving the world. She doesn't urge him to set her problems aside for the bigger picture. She's presented as the emotional core of this game, but she's only around when the Didact isn't. And, these two plots, it should have been very easy to make them intertwine with each other and cause problems for the other, but they're just entirely separate. and they only really come together at the very last minute when Cortana uses her insanity to overload a shield generator. It's not exactly the heartfelt sacrifice the game thinks it is.
The two plots issue feels like poor direction. The team wanted to do two different stories. Someone suggested, why don't we do both? But nobody tried to steer the two story threads into each other. The thing is that if we take away the part where the game throws a bunch of nonsense at you that makes no sense, pollutes the timeline with a bunch of retcons that retcon each other, all that stuff, right? Let's take that ball of crazy and stupid and push that aside. There isn't actually that much to the plot of this game.
It's weird that they wasted the didact. I could have seen this game setting him up as the villain for the trilogy. Because, as far as I understand, 343 was created to handle the Halo IP. It's not like Microsoft tested the waters with another company. Like, they made a branch of their own internal game development studio to handle the Halo series, and you have to assume that they wanted a trilogy out of this.
If you look at where Halo left off with Halo 3, and where Halo 4 picks up, obviously they wanted to sort of handle the leftovers, which didn't necessarily need handling, right? It's like Chief's out in space, Cortana's crazy, who cares, doesn't matter. They wanted to incorporate that into the plot, obviously.
Sure.
Aside from us being told point blank that the stakes have never been higher, if you look at the way events transpire in the game, the stakes have never been lower.
I don't know, I'd still say Halo 3's stakes are pretty low.
So, the Infinity shows up, and it's this super technologically advanced Giga carrier, right? Obviously, humanity have progressed while the Chief has been in cryo. The Didact appears, and he has his digitizer gun and his giant spheroid, whatever. What's his plan? He's going to turn on the digitizer and digitize everyone? When he attacks the Infinity, we repel him with some missiles and some guns. Like,
I mean, that's not unfair to say. No.
They try to show that he's technologically superior, but at the same time, every time we go up against the Didact or anything that the Didact is using, it's crushed handily. It's the same problem that the series has always had. They try to convince us that the humans are on the back foot, and the humans just blow past every single obstacle that's put in their way. With almost no resistance, right?
Yeah.
The Didact is the closest that we've ever really gotten to a threat, because obviously, you know, he causes problems to the Infinity, and he does his whole beacon signal trick and all of that, right? But ultimately, when it comes to our villain and our protagonist squaring up, our villain never stands a chance.
Well, no, we have the power of QuickTime events.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, like,
Yeah.
if they knew they were going to be making more games, this was a perfectly fine thing. Like, you can have the first part of a trilogy just set up the villain and have things still happen and be resolved. Like, this could have still ended with Cortana dying, and we're like, forced off of Requiem, and we have to run. And it's like, oh god, you know, there's this guy on this weird planet, and he's going to do something. But the game is very busy.
Yes.
Again, I think up until Reclaimer, the level Reclaimer, the game is fine, story-wise. Not anything particularly special, but certainly fine.
The point that I'm getting at here is that where do we begin the game? Where does the game end? What has changed? What is the greater threat? How has it affected the universe that it inhabits?
Yeah. No, I definitely think that Halo overall as a series really has a scope problem.
It does.
It doesn't know what scale it wants to operate on.
And that's the thing, is with the Didact, even though he is supposedly this universe-ending threat, what actually changes when he reawakens? And obviously, like, we defeat him and stop him before he can do anything really bad.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, that should not have happened. We talked about how a competent story writer in Halo 3 would have started at the end of Halo 2,
Yes.
a competent story writer in Halo 4 would have looked at the fact that they introduced a very powerful villain and a new enemy faction and said, okay, let's not throw all of this away in the first game.
The game begins with Chief in cryo, and it's just the Chief stranded in space, and then he bumps into some grand new threat.
Which is fine. That's a
perfectly fine way to begin a story.
Yeah.
But the problem with Halo 4's story is that he bumps into this grand new threat and it doesn't even mildly inconvenience humanity. The worst he does is cause Infinity to crash, which apparently only does minimal damage to this starship.
Yeah, it only does minimal damage, and it's not even him that causes it to crash, it's Del Rio's stupidity.
The biggest effect that you can say Halo 4 has on the grander scope of like the universe and the narrative and the story is that Cortana dies at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But how important is Cortana really? What events has she influenced that?
Well, that's the thing.
Right? Yeah.
This is why I don't like her. This is why I don't like her place in the story, because the things we know that Cortana is or has been, custodian of ancient library of knowledge from Reach, the ship AI of the Pillar of Autumn, the station AI of Cairo.
If I want to be fair, which I do, the most important thing Cortana ever did was get hooked into the database in the first Halo, where she supposedly learned about the true purpose of the Halos. She figured out what was going on with Spark, and she manipulated the teleportation network so we could travel around, right? Did she destroy Halo using Halo's own internal systems? No, we overloaded the fusion reactors on the Autumn.
Mm-hmm.
So even her getting plugged into the fucking command center of Halo ultimately wasn't that important, right? Someone else, like Spark, could have told us the true purpose of Halo if we had asked a question.
It was information he was more than happy to give up once somebody did ask it. And again, it was something he was willing to give up to a human, which apparently he was the direct, opposition of.
And I bring that up because ultimately Cortana's importance in the Halo series is simply that she is around when important things happen, just like the Chief, right? Mm-hmm. She happens to be there in Chief's noggin when big things happen. And sometimes she discovers and relays important information.
This cave is not a natural formation.
If she feels like it.
This is what I was talking about in one of the games. God, I can't even remember anymore. About, Bungie could never decide if Master Chief was a silent protagonist player insert or a character in their story. Because Cortana's just an observer, but so is Master Chief. There's a lot of times in any of these three games where he should have taken charge of a situation and made plans and directed the course of action, but he can't because he's a player insert and you don't know if the player would want to do that. It's weird. It's one of the things I do like about Halo 4, which makes him more of a distinct character with more of a direct influence on the story, but it is just that story ultimately goes nowhere and ends with a weird appeal to an emotional core that was absent for most of the game.
And that's Halo 4.
Yeah.
I could totally understand why people were disappointed by this game.
Same.
That was the games that we played throughout the series.
Yeah.
Obviously, neither of us have played 5.
5 as of time of recording currently not available for PC. So
after 4 I have no desire to play 5.
Yeah.
That said, Infinite's still coming out, apparently.
Yeah, if Halo Infinite can actually deliver on the experimental promises Halo 1 made as far as the environment design, cool. I've talked before about how I really like how Crysis handles its levels, And if Halo Infinite is just that, I'm for it, honestly.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the story's gonna be any good or, like, understandable because it's pulling from Halo Wars 2, the RTS that I don't think anybody played.
I haven't even played the first Halo Wars. So, again, we've talked a lot about story and writing and how you tie that into gameplay and how character motivations are important. I differ from Reckon when it comes to video games because the thing that I care about is the fun gameplay good to play.
See, here's the thing about Halo and my relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
I have maintained that Halo 3 is a bad game since basically the year it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I played it in 2007 or maybe early 2008 and I was not impressed. And I was like, this is a bad game.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was like, why is it a bad game? It's so fun to play. And I was like, the story sucks. And they're like, don't care about the story. It's just play the gameplay. It's all about the gameplay. And it's like, okay, gameplay-wise, yes, Halo as a series has consistently been pretty good, pretty tightly designed. Bungie knows how to make shooting aliens feel pretty good. And then when I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty okay, maybe above average given what time you're looking at, alien shooter game, and then the same people will say to me, but the story is just so much better than anything else. I'm like, you can't tell me to ignore the story and then go praise the story.
That's the thing, is that a game can have a good story and bad gameplay and be a good game. A game can have good gameplay and a bad story and be a good game. A game cannot have bad gameplay and a bad story and be a good game. That's simple math.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, is that Halo has moments of good gameplay. It has hints of brilliance. But ultimately, the way that the blocks assemble usually ends up not being great. I don't think that the Halo games have ever been great. And a big part of that is that the gameplay is only good rarely, and the story is only good never.
If this was your first exposure ever to an FPS, I could see you being into it.
Yeah.
Ditto for if this was your first exposure to, like, science fiction, going for the story. I can see being into this. But the instant you look past these games, you will see not even just better media, but also the source material Bungie, let's not get ourselves in trouble and say that they heavily inspired themselves with. Like, hey, do you like the UNSC? Go watch Aliens. Do you like the Covenant? Go play StarCraft.
You think that the giant Forerunner mystery structures all throughout space are cool? Boy, do I have 30 years of sci-fi books for you to go through.
Yeah. And it's like, as far as an FPS goes, again, the weapons in Halo 1 were literally nothing special. Every game had those weapons. They tried in other games, but they never really made anything truly, like, weird and alien. And as far as gameplay goes, you were saying, Skell, about how, like, playing the game, shooting the aliens gets tiring. It's because the level design sucks.
Yeah.
It's flat, it's boring, it's samey. Like, how many times in Halo 1's Assault on the Control Room do you go through the same goddamn room?
Some of the standout segments of gameplay in the series are exceptions.
Yeah.
They stand out because they are good when the things before them were not.
Yeah. I love how everybody gets very excited to tell you how Bungie was so genius to lower the crosshair because it forces you to look up. And it's like, cool. There are no enemies up.
What are you talking about? In Halo 2 on heroic difficulty and above, there are the jackal snipers that instantly kill you.
Yeah, here's the thing about level design. If you want people to look up, give them a reason to look up.
Yep.
Halo does not have vertical enemy encounters.
But skyboxes.
It does very rarely. Sometimes you'll have to look up to a ledge to shoot an alien.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not... You're not peering upward to try to pick out certain targets. Like, sometimes you just have to kind of tilt your head back a little and go like, oh, he's like 3 feet above me.
The first time you encounter a jackal sniper, you will be on the roof of the building next to the crash site. So you'll be eye to eye.
Yeah. The level design in Halo is very consistently, not even bad, just boring. It's not interesting. You can have all the fancy brutalist set dressing you want, but if all I'm doing is going around 90-degree corners, it's not for anything. It's just like the empty areas in Halo 1. It's not for anything. It's not accomplishing anything. All these levels where it's just like, you walk down a hallway, kill an elite and 3 grunts, walk down a hallway, kill an elite and 3 grunts. It's why I have so much praise for Reach, because it manages a constant flow in its level design that take you to these interesting encounters without any filler between them, like Assault on the Control Room, any level where you're locked in a box until the game says you're allowed to leave in Halo 2, ditto for 3, where you're just kind of like dropped into areas and then enemies show up and it's flat and boring.
Wait for this door to open.
Yeah.
Pew, pew.
It's a lack of ambition, and it's dressed up by Bungie's marketing. They say, we lowered the crosshair so you have to look up. No one asked to what end. They were like, that's genius.
It's really funny that you cite that specific example, because getting people to look up in video games is a design thing, a problem in design.
Oh, yeah.
That has existed since the fucking Y-axis was added. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's a common joke that, yeah, gamers never look up. But Bungie didn't solve anything. They just forced you to kind of look a little higher than you normally would, but also they didn't put Unreal's ceiling turret enemy. They didn't put cacodemons that float around. They didn't put the scrags that teleport through the air.
They didn't put the barnacles that you have to look out for. Funnily enough, the barnacle tongues exist to get you to look up at them.
It's a design problem that, to this day, I don't trust Bungie to be smart enough to solve. Even when so many other games have made it seem so simple. Bungie are stuck in the 90s. They're still making Marathon.
I would honestly say that the design decisions of the Halo series are solutions looking for problems.
Mm-hmm.
They solve something that isn't a problem, and they ignore the actual problems they have. But because when it comes to the actual game design, they have no incentive to evolve or change or grow or try something different outside of wanting to do it for themselves. Because, let's face it, Halo succeeds regardless of the quality of a given entry.
Yeah. I mean, Halo 3 and 4 are both testaments to that, as well as Halo 1.
People bought Halo 5. And here's the thing, I haven't played Halo 5. I played Halo 4. The fact that someone could play Halo 4 and then go, yeah, I'm going to get Halo 5 is mind-boggling. But at the same time, I want to get Infinite, so they got me, right? Like, they got me.
Neither of us have played 5. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't give a shit about Infinite. I mean, that's the thing. Online, you can't find a good word about Halo 5 except like, oh, its multiplayer is really cool.
Is it, though?
That's what people say.
Can we even trust that?
I wouldn't. Halo 5 is so universally maligned, and yet these people are like, wow, I can't wait for Halo Infinite. If you don't trust 343 to make these games, don't buy them. What are you going to miss out on? Not playing Halo? Well, then it doesn't matter the quality of the games, because all you want to do is say you're playing a Halo game.
But that's the thing, is that you're convinced you're missing out on a cultural event, because Microsoft have paid an awful lot of money to convince you as such.
Yeah.
Your peers are going to get Halo, they're going to talk about it, and you're not going to know what they're talking about. Ultimately, Halo as a series, it has so little to say outside of cool spaceman fights that the game designers had no incentive to grow, and the writers couldn't even use mythology in a consistent or interesting way.
Oh,
They
God.
mixed mythical names at random with seemingly no intention of having those names or terms inform you of anything about anyone.
Yeah, it's so like, okay, Bungie made Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Marathon, famously, is the name of a city that a guy ran to in ancient times to tell of an invading army. That's why they're called marathons, because you run for a long time. Okay, so Bungie likes Greek mythology. That's why you play a Spartan in Halo, because Spartans, they're mythologized. But then, like, why do Spartans use Mjolnir armor? That's not Greek.
No, that's...
Norse.
The funny thing is that the armor is called Mjolnir armor.
Yeah, the armor is called Mjolnir, and Mjolnir, anyone who's paid attention to movies in the last decade knows that Mjolnir's a fucking hammer.
Here's the thing. They never talk about, in reference to Mjolnir, they never talk about Thor. There's no Thor anything. They never talk about lightning or storms. They never talk about the harvest.
Well, isn't there a planet called Harvest? I learned that from you talking about a book. When I had to sift through all those book covers and one was called Contact Harvest.
Oh, let's not. But look.
Okay. I have a secret bone to pick.
Okay.
With Bungie and their mythology boner.
Okay.
In the video game Destiny 2, there is a location called Nessus. In the game, this location is referred to as a centaur. Both of these are real things. There is a phenomenon known as a centaur, and there's also one named Nessus in real life. The name Nessus comes from Greek mythology, where this character was a centaur. So you can see how the name fits both for naming the phenomena and why Bungie might be interested in it. But! Fucking but, Bungie. Why Nessus? There are tens of thousands, possibly millions of these things to choose from. They could have picked any name they wanted. Why Nessus? Well, Nessus is one of the main characters of Ringworld. And we all know how you feel about Ringworld. I know what you're about, Bungie. I know what you did. You're not clever. Ringworld is not an obscure book. It's very famous.
The closest that Halo gets to a consistent naming convention, outside of, like, UNSC vehicles being named after animals, Covenant vehicles being named after various ghosts, is that they borrow religious terminology and iconography for the Covenant. Which, you know, it's not earth-shaking in terms of originality. But here's the thing about that, right? They slapped in all that religious terminology, the prophets, the Great Journey, the Arbiters, the Schism, all of that, right? We don't actually learn anything about the Covenant's religion.
Yeah, no, like, I understand that they are religious, but yeah, like you said, I don't know what their religion is. They like the rings, they like finding Forerunner stuff. I guess maybe they think the Forerunners are gods of some kind, but then, if they know so much about them, then don't they realize that they were humans? Or maybe they weren't, but they were... Oh, fuck.
So here's the thing, and I can hear someone somewhere stand up and shout, but the Great Journey is part of their religion. Can anyone who played the Halo games tell me anything about Covenant dogma aside from the fact that they revere the Forerunners and they want to activate the Halos?
Do they or do they not know that the Great Journey will kill everything? arrangement necessities.
Yeah, their biology is so different, right? And yet they come together under the same theistical umbrella. What do they think happens when they die? Is the great journey a way for them to circumvent death? Or is death an expected part of it, as you said? Why are only the prophets the apex of society? If they're prophets, who are they speaking for? Are they monotheistic? Are they polytheistic? The Forerunners, are they gods? In what way? I could ask a million questions, and the games don't answer any of them.
Yeah. A line from Halo 2 where one of the prophets is like, we'll activate the halos, and this time none of you, referring to the humans, will be left behind. It's like, that says to me that they know that, according to the Bungie lore, humans were hinted to be Forerunners. Like, don't they have any weird feelings about fighting people who might be the very things they're worshipping? Or, like, is it all a lie just to get power? But to what end?
The prophets in dialogue in a couple of the games mention the path to salvation, or the glorious path to salvation. The games don't tell us what the Covenant think they need saving from. Is it sin? Are prophets going around telling grunts they're going to suffer because they touch themselves at night? Like, why do they do this?
Well, it's also just like, we can ask all these questions and never get any answers. But what I went on about in Halo 2, when the Covenant were expanded to have, like, these personalities assigned to them, it became very clear that they're just pulling from the Protoss from StarCraft. And the thing about that is that, just like the Covenant are religious, the Protoss are also religious, but you can talk about what their religion stands for and entails by playing the games. It's just like, this is another thing that Bungie saw somewhere else, went, that's cool, and took it and slapped it onto their horrible amalgamation of games. And they didn't put any thought into it, because, like, aside from the actual practices of this religion, of the Covenant, what does being in the Covenant get them? Do they get resources? Do they get safety from outside threats? Because it seems like they're quite powerful. They're killing humanity. Does that mean we made the first move on them and the Covenant formed to protect these various races from us? Because, I mean, that seems like a justifiable reason to be at war with us, I'll be honest, speaking as an American. But, like, the grunts, they breathe methane. What do they get from subjecting themselves to a life of wearing pressure suits among their peers? Like, I've been watching some Star Trek recently. Look at the Federation of Planets. Everybody in it gets access to resources, trade. They do get access to protection from external threats, of which there are a lot. They get to add their voice to this growing interstellar community for research and exploration. But whenever we see the Covenant, they're just kind of like hanging around a halo.
Waiting to be shot by humans, I might add.
What if an alien race came up to you, like you personally, and were like, you should join our cool kids club. We're a bunch of aliens. We're really religious. And you're like, well, what do I get? Nothing. But you get to hang out with us while we stand in the parking lot of a church.
And not knowing why the Covenant are willing to die fighting humans, it hurts the story. It's something that directly impacts the characters that inhabit the story. If there's some way to resolve the conflict diplomatically, then the story ends.
Yeah, like, okay, so... Oh god, we didn't even touch on this! Shit!
No.
Halo 2's massive retcon of the Covenant not knowing that the Halos are weapons. Like, shouldn't they want to know that? Like, I understand religious dogma can be a hell of a thing, but shouldn't a religious leader being told that the thing they've devoted their entire life for is bad, actually, and, like, with proof, be like, oh, whoops, I should probably think about this. Like, maybe I'm overestimating the rationalization powers of religious leaders, but I feel like if I was hanging out near a weird thing in space and someone was like, That's an incredibly dangerous weapon. I'd be like, whoa, what?
So it's implied in Halo 2 and shown in Halo 3 that the Prophet's ignorance is willful and malicious in its intent. They know that the Halos are weapons, and they are misleading the Covenant, right?
Yeah, but like, why? Do they just get a bunch of friends and then kill them for fun?
So that's the thing, is that the Prophet's creating the Covenant's religion on a lie. It exists because the writers backed themselves into a corner.
Oh, absolutely.
We were told that the human war with the Covenant was unwinnable, that the Covenant was so overpowering that they just annihilated the humans at every turn. The only way that the writers could reasonably get the humans to win the war is to either A, have the humans pull some sort of ace out of their sleeve, which is what we're told the Spartans are, and they're still losing, so that doesn't work. So B, the Covenant have to destroy themselves. So how do we do that? Is it some sort of complex theistical dispute over the nature of their belief? No! Turns out Space Pope's just full of shit.
Well, also, remember that in the tearing themselves apart, the fact that the prophets lied to everybody about the Halos being weapons doesn't matter. Like,
no.
At the end of Halo 2, the Arbiter is convinced, and he tries convincing Tartarus, who doesn't believe him, but the reason the elites defect with the Arbiter is because the brutes are fighting them. Not because they suddenly know that the Halos aren't a good thing.
No, it's because of a purge.
The fact that they were betrayed by the prophets literally doesn't matter. There are so many major plot points you'd think in Halo canon that literally don't matter, and it's awful.
That's the thing. Arbiter is told that the prophets are liars, and then he comes home to tell everyone, and they're already killing each other.
Yeah, like the information doesn't add anything to the story at that point. It's wild that this can be so badly written. It's like you have a story where so much is happening constantly that nothing can actually affect the flow of that story.
And the problems just pile up, and it circles back to showing that the writers don't know how to utilize their own narrative.
Yeah, it's very clear that the story of Halo is just being crowbarred into place. It doesn't feel like a narrative is taking place. It doesn't feel like anybody's actions are affecting the world.
A good example of that is that they destroy the Covenant with a schism by just shoehorning in the fact that the prophets are liars. Whereas they created a universe-ending threat in the Flood and introduced it to the story, and that could be used as a way to weaken the Covenant so that the human can destroy both. And that never comes up, right? We're told that the Covenant have experience fighting the Flood. And apparently it's not that bad because they just fucking glass everything and the Flood aren't a problem, really.
Yeah, no, like, again, the Flood throughout the entire series literally don't matter. You could remove the Flood from Halo the series, and the only thing that would happen is the games would get mercifully shorter.
The games are so flimsy. The narrative is so fragile that you pull on a single thread and the whole sweater explodes.
Yeah, and honestly, if the answer to any of this, coming from anybody, is LOL, read the books, just shut up. Don't start, and don't get me started, okay? A book series should not have to run damage control for plot holes like this. This should have been caught by anybody in the writer's room paying attention. If the player doesn't know the stakes, doesn't know the people involved, doesn't know the setup, they cannot care about the outcome. It is as simple as that.
And the thing is that the story becomes important because the gameplay is not always good. So you need to lean on the story to push the player towards those moments that are memorable. Except the story doesn't actually push you anywhere. The Master Chief has no incentive to put one foot in front of the other throughout this entire series.
No, he has no agency. Everybody else tells him what to do.
Most of his problems are solved by third parties for him while he's away.
Yeah. Again, leaving Earth in Halo 2. Leaving Earth again when the Flood show up in Halo 3.
We're told that the humans' conflict with the Covenant is unwinnable, and then the Covenant show up on Earth, and, like, it's fine.
Well, this is just another thing where the gameplay doesn't match the story. Because, yeah, it's supposed to be this desperate last gasp. And it's just like, playing the games, all we do is win. Without effort. I made this point to somebody on the internet, and they mistakenly thought I was talking about the actual difficulty of the games themselves. No, I mean the fact that there's always a Pelican available to give us a Warthog. There's always ammo and cool power weapons to find. There's always more Marines to drop off. There's always constant radio communication. Anybody can be anywhere whenever they need to be. There's no sense of something missing. There's no sense of, like, we are low on ammo, you have to scrounge Covenant weapons only. There's no sense of, like, there's this really expansive stretch of land, you gotta hoof it or find a Covenant vehicle to commandeer. Like, how much more interesting would these games be if the fact that humans are losing was reflected at all in the gameplay?
Well, hell, let's tie it back to something that we're told time and time again is so important. Cortana. Cortana is a human-built AI full of all sorts of fun information about human tactics and strategy and assets and where humans are and all of that, right? On top of that, in Halo 1, she gets plugged into the Halo itself, and she learns everything that is stored within the Halo's databanks, right? That should make her the single most important war asset that the Covenant could conceive of. The Covenant should be doing everything in their power. They should be redirecting entire war fleets just to get Cortana, and they don't even know she exists in any of the games.
And the reason everybody treats her like a deific figure in the other games is not because of that. Like, the fact that she has this knowledge is not brought up in the games ever.
She doesn't even bring it up to you. She just keeps that information to herself.
Yeah, and, ditto for Reach going forward. Which is why I hate that plot point so much.
It's not good. It's bad. And it's not bad in a way where you can, like, be like, oh, it's funny, or, oh, it's forgivable because of this, or it's just, no part of this narrative works in a way that is consistent with itself.
If you focus on any single point, everything around it falls apart. It's inexcusable, honestly. Like, I know we're just some assholes on the internet, but think about this story for a minute, and you'll come up with questions you will never have an answer for. And not in, like, a cool, mysterious way.
And it's not just that you won't have answers for them. It's that the people that could give you those answers will make sport of thumbing their nose at you.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't want to give the answers because they don't want to do the work.
They think it's great that you have no idea what's going on and you're not getting any answers. They think it's hilarious.
Because it lets them sell books.
I'm sure that the people that wrote those books cared about what they were writing, but only insofar as the content from cover to cover. They don't care about its place in the larger scope, surely. And if they do, fucking commend them for that, because Bungie don't. Like...
The thing about the books, too, I'm so annoyed by them. And it's not something I devote, like, a lot of effort to, but, like, in this circumstance, I'm going to be very annoyed about them. Because I was having another conversation online. Never talk to Halo fans. They're crazy. Don't do it. I don't like them. You can be like, hey, this massive plot hole in one of these games, and they'll be like, it's not a plot hole. It's explained in this trilogy. Just read the trilogy. And you're like, why should I have to do that? And, like, why should I have to go out of my way to interact with other media to get answers to a question that I asked of this game? And they're like, no, it's brilliant. It's so vibrant and expansive. And it's like, what if Bungie just didn't try to sell me books?
I want answer to question. Answer is in book. Why should I read the book? Well, you're a fan of the series, aren't you? Well, no, because it doesn't answer any of my questions. How can I know anything about it to be a fan? It's all somewhere else.
But even better, I've been told multiple times, actually, that, well, of course, Bungie never wanted any of the books written in the first place. It was all Microsoft's doing. They commissioned them. And here's the thing about that. I responded to that by asking, if that was true, why didn't Bungie write tighter stories that don't have these massive gaps in them that you need a trilogy of books to fill? And the fact that they chose not to means that they do want the books written. They do want the extra money for forcing people to read them. And these people are like, no, no, no. Bungie did that. They were tired of what Microsoft was doing around Halo 2, so when Halo 3 came around, they wrote the tightest story they could. And I was like, okay, here's a couple questions we've asked them in this video so far. And they're like, well, I mean, it's really easily explained. You just read these books and... It's just like, what? No! The whole point was that you were telling me I didn't have to, but now you just... I hate them. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Either some of the books or most of the books or all of the books are part of the canon, right? In which case you have to go to external media to get answers to questions that should already be answered. Or they're not canon, which means that the people writing these stories have absolutely no interest in answering these questions, which means they don't care about you and don't respect your intelligence.
I have an example. So, you know all that stuff we were asking about what the hell the Overmind was talking about in Halo 3?
Yes.
I was having a conversation with somebody on the internet. Terrible mistake. Never do this.
This always ends well.
I was like, well, hey, what the hell was up with anything the Overmind was saying? Like, it seems pretty clear to me that he was basically saying, pre-order the next trilogy of books coming out winter 2008. Like, after Halo 3 came out. And the person very smugly responded, actually, those books didn't come out until 2011. So there. And I was like, you realize how that's worse, right? You realize that means that Bungie didn't have answers when they wrote that dialogue in-game. They were done with the series in 2011. They hadn't thought about Halo 3 for 4 years. That just means that they made the Overmind say words and had no intention to follow it up with anything. And they're like, nuh-uh, 'cause it's in the books. I can't really fully articulate, with words invented by the human species, how confused that makes me.
I feel like I'm starting to see the quantum realm. I'm starting to gain an understanding of how the universe works. The fundamental forces.
Well, okay, let's move on from plot holes. Otherwise, it's got more plot holes in it than a fucking doily. And I want to talk about something else that has always bothered me about the series' most staunch defenders, tying into they didn't want the books written but they did, etc. The idea that Bungie, quote, always wanted to do X or would have done Y. So, like, the original reveal trailer for Halo 1 had a very heavy emphasis on these herds of endemic wildlife. Like, Master Chief was driving a warthog around them, and they were, like, panicking and stampeding with him. And it obviously is nowhere in the finished game. There aren't even birds in the sky in Halo 1. And people will go like, oh yeah, they really wanted to get those working, but they couldn't because of the development troubles. And, you know, it's really a shame. They always wanted to do that. It's like, okay, why didn't they do it in Halo 2?
Well, Halo 2 had troubled development.
Okay, why didn't they do it in Halo 3?
Well, they kind of... There's birds in Halo 3.
So it took until Reach for there to be any endemic wildlife on somewhere that isn't Earth whatsoever. We made fun of this in the Halo 3 series. I was like, oh, look at this crazy alien wildlife. It was a rat in the jungle. Like, that was the first creature we'd seen that wasn't holding a gun in the entire series after being on multiple alien superstructures. And Reach gave us 3 groups of ostriches and those 2 big guys that we fight once. They really wanted the final level of Halo 2 to be you fighting through the Eiffel Tower.
Mm-hmm.
So why wasn't that the start of Halo 3? They wanted you to fight a giant sentinel in Halo 3. You brought that to my attention, Skell.
Mm-hmm.
So why did they make ODST take place in the city? Why didn't they make it like a different game where you fought a giant sentinel? You know, at some point, when Bungie has been making this series for a decade, saying that they always wanted to do something loses meaning when they continuously refuse to do it.
Every new question leads to more questions, and the answer to all of them is because fuck you, shut up, though.
I honestly think the answer is that Bungie didn't actually care. They never cared about this series. I don't believe them. It's a mess. Halo as a series is an abject mess. And Bungie took exactly 0 steps to ever try to clean anything up. They didn't care about gameplay features, they didn't care about trying to tell a good story, they didn't care about the world. They sure as hell didn't care about the players trying to make sense of anything, otherwise they would have, tried to tell a better story. They were able to coast for 9 years off of admittedly tight gameplay and a couple positive sounding blog posts. Go to the website and learn about how Bungie gives a shit. They're lying through their teeth, but you'll buy it.
The more we talk about it, the more exhausted we get, and that just goes to tell you how outstanding the design is. And so, at last, we come to the multiplayer, which I'm sure people have been screeching at us about as we talked about the story and this and that. Who cares? The multiplayer, right?
Yep, the multiplayer.
So, people love it. Lots of people talk about it. Many will tell you it's this highly unique, it's collective chaos with vehicles everywhere and last-second flag captures and high-skill clutch plays, and you throw a grenade and it launches a sniper rifle and you catch it and all of that, right? And you use that to get the game-winning kill, all that stuff, yeah?
Sure.
People who tell you that, they've never played a Battlefield game. So yeah. I'm not really, one to talk in great depth about Halo's multiplayer, despite having played it quite a bit with you, other friends, etc. Because Halo's multiplayer isn't really a style of multiplayer that I like the most, that I vibe with. It's that arcadey brand of popcorn shooter. Everyone respawns everywhere. It's all chaos. You're scrambling over objectives or pickups, or you're trying to rush to the best camping spot. You got your Halo, Call of Duties, the later Battlefield games, that sort of shooter. Anyone can play it. Anyone can get kills. It's more luck than anything, just because of the way respawning works and all of that stuff. I grew up playing stuff like Tribes and Battlefield, like Battlefield 1942, the older stuff. I moved on to shit like Rainbow Six, Red Orchestra, Armor. So that frantic, chaotic style of multiplayer, it's not something I hate, but it's what Halo's multiplayer fundamentally tries to be. It's not something that I'm super into, but people like it a lot. Enough that they tried to keep Halo 2's multiplayer going on the original Xbox long after the server shut down. They love it enough that the series broke sales records over and over. It etched out a lasting legacy. Halo is certainly one of those games that people would buy and only play the multiplayer and ignore every other part of it. I think those people are crazy, but people did it. But what say you, reckon? Have you a more nuanced and well-articulated take on the multiplayer?
Somebody's probably going to say no, but just out of the way, the fast arcade-style arena shooter, that is what I like, even right now. I still play Unreal Tournament 2004 with surprising regularity for a game that old.
You do, yeah.
I download new maps, I make new maps every now and then. That is the kind of game I like, but the people who say that Halo is one of them have never played one of them, because Halo's not an arena shooter.
No.
And I don't think Bungie ever knew what kind of shooter its game was, because everything about it shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what actually makes it fun. Because, again, just personally, the on-foot combat doesn't do it for me. The movement is too slow and imprecise. Everybody's sliding around everywhere. The maps are very flat and boring. There's no verticality. There's no interesting traversal options. The guns are... they're the same guns you get in Call of Duty. You know, I know people don't like hearing that, but they are. They feel okay to use, but they are, like, it's an assault rifle, it's a 3-shot burst rifle, it's a sniper rifle, you know, everything has that. Plus, like, you know, the later games, you just spawn with the battle rifle anyway, so the whole thing about map control for the good weapons doesn't matter, because you have the battle rifle.
I mean, the battle rifle can kill you dead quicker than the rocket launcher can, just by virtue of how long it takes the rocket launcher to reach a target.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, what's the rocket launcher good for then? Well, it's good for killing vehicles. And that is what sets Halo multiplayer apart from pretty much everything else. The ability to hop in a tank, or have some people pile into a warthog and tear around the map, it's a fun thing to do in a way that trudging towards someone holding down the fire button and bopping them in the face once their shields are down just isn't. But that's largely what happens, and it's because ever since the first game, I don't think Bungie understood that the vehicles were what was fun. Only 2 of the maps they made themselves, Blood Gulch and Sidewinder, support vehicles at all. And going forward to Halos 2, 3, and Reach, they just keep the vehicle count really low. They're really tight-fisted with how much fun you're allowed to have. You know, at least in the default game mode, sure, you can always load up to, like, team heavies or whatever, but then the balance is just thrown out of the window and, you know, whatever. And, like, even the big team matches, the 8v8s, they typically only give you like 2 or 3 warthogs and maybe a ghost on either side. And smaller maps only get you like a mongoose. And like, just look at how popular Sandbox was, right? Why is that? Well, you have like 10 vehicles per side.
Yep.
And that's when the game is fun and the multiplayer is interesting and actually elevated beyond just a weird, slow-paced Call of Duty. But in Halo 2, they added the ability to outright destroy vehicles, because in Halo 1, of course, vehicles didn't get destroyed in multiplayer. You just took damage as your person, you just die, and the vehicle would, you know, roll to a stop. And that created its own tug-of-war style thing with, like, trying to keep an enemy's vehicle on your side of the map, because, oh, you know, they overextended with their tank, you killed the driver, and now you have 2 tanks. Very impressive. So, being able to destroy them outright, like in 2, 3, Reach, etc., might have its arguments for balance purposes, but it also means that the larger maps can be utterly depopulated of their vehicles. And then players just have to walk around on foot, and they're just back to doing the ground combat. And the funny thing about all this is, like, the Gearbox port that everybody likes to shit on because it broke the, you know, shader transparent generic. Everybody's seen that one guy's video. But Gearbox understood what Bungie didn't. All of the maps Gearbox added were twice as big, at least, as Bungie's own, and all of them were just stuffed to the brim with vehicles, including Banshees and Shade Turrets, which Bungie never put in any of their own maps. You know, those maps were always the most populated back in the PC days, and honestly, for good reason. Death Island, Infinity, Gephyrophobia, those maps are just far and away better than anything Bungie put out. Bungie either didn't take notice or just ignored the success their maps had, and I think it's pretty unfortunate.
It's one of those things where there's they were trying very hard to do one thing when obviously the thing that people liked was the other thing, and that's probably debatable. There's probably weirdos out there that are like, no, but I love spawning and getting immediately punched in the back of the head and dying. It's great.
Yeah, the spawn system in Halo is so bad. Because you spawn on your teammates, so you either get killed or you help kill someone else. And it's just like, well, that person wasn't having any fun if they get killed, because they thought they were in a 1v1 with someone, and you pop into existence out of nowhere, and just like, oh, okay, I have more battle rifle bullets. Or they're getting shot to death, you spawn in, and you also get shot to death.
I think the modes that probably have the most enduring legacies, and like that the people remember most fondly, are like Capture the Flag or Assault. But even those have their pretty serious problems, especially with smaller maps and stuff where there are no vehicles.
Bungie did something. It must have been in Halo 2, because I don't really remember it in Halo 3 or Halo 1 that much. They made you slow down when you pick up the flag.
Yes.
And on the surface, that's fine. Because, again, my problem, if you get the flag 1/4, 1/3 of the way out into the map, can't recover it, you know, fair, make the flag carrier slower. Give them some sort of disadvantage other than not being able to fire a weapon. So they added the throw flag button.
Yeah.
Not drop flag, like a lot of other games have, but throw flag.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw it faster than a person can run. So they've negated the downside. Nobody in testing threw the flag and realized that it went 10 feet in a second.
Oh, they totally did. It's just that everyone thought that was great and didn't think of any of the drawbacks that might have.
It discourages team play, it encourages bullshit lone wolf tactics, and
It does.
It's not fun to experience because it's that much easier to get the flag to the critical 1/3 point.
It feels like something where they played the game in the Bungie offices and everyone played a certain way and nobody spared a single thought for trying to do it the other way or trying a different set of tactics or a different approach.
The throw flag option feels like it was made so you could be like, hey, teammate, here, I'm gonna throw the flag down to you, then I'll hop in this warthog over here and I'll pull up and catch you and we can drive off into the sunset and win. But really, it's just like, oh, this is faster than me sprinting? Okay.
I'll just do this.
I'll just do it myself. And that's what I mean when I say that I don't think Bungie knows how to make video games. The fact that it persisted for so long, even though it's such a miserable experience, either they like that it's a miserable experience, they've never noticed anybody playing the game this way, which, again, just points to them not paying attention. Or, I don't know, they think it was funny? Like, make a bad system on purpose because it's funny? I don't know.
I guarantee you there are people that defend the way these mechanics work, right? And if we were speaking to them directly, they'd be coming at us with, no, it's good because of this and this and this, and they'd appeal to specific sets of circumstances that don't happen often, that make for like an exciting hype moment in gameplay, but are maybe one in every 500,000 games played.
Mm-hmm.
But again, lots of people love Halo, broke sales records. So
Yeah.
What do you and I know?
Am I telling them they're wrong?
Yes.
Am I telling them that they're wrong? No.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, they are wrong. Hardline stance.
I mean, I think my thing with Halo that I have to have expressed by now, God, I hope. Like, I don't care if you like Halo, but please experience something else before saying that Halo does it best.
Yeah. So, how about the other games then?
Yeah, there are other games. Honestly, looking at how long this video is, yikes. Might have to do another one, just kind of touching on those a little more in depth. Wonder how that's gonna go. I've played 3 other non-shooter Halo games. I played the top-down shooters, Spartan Strike and Spartan Assault, which are fun. I mean, there's only so many ways to go wrong with a top-down arcade shooter, and I don't think either of them do. I think they're quite enjoyable. I don't know if they're what a Halo superfan would crave, but they're good little time wasters. They follow the typical top-down thing of, like, level-based, you have different objectives, different challenges, it's fairly replayable. They're good. I don't know, I think they're usually like $3 each, so if you need more Halo in your life, you can get it for cheap. I also played Halo Wars, the first one, only the first one. This is probably going to be the one I focus on more if I do this other video. There's this ship called the Spirit of Fire, and it's a human ship. They come across the Flood, and they fight the Flood a bunch, they fight the Covenant. I played it a very long time ago now, during a very busy and mentally taxing portion of my life. So I don't remember like all the details. I've got it reinstalled, I'm gonna replay it for this other video. I remember having a good amount of fun with it. I have it on PC, I don't know how it plays on console. I hear people say it was pretty good on console, so there you go. I remember the campaign being pretty entertaining, a good mix of mission objectives and a good drip of units as you go along. It introduced a lot of vehicles that I hope make it into Halo Infinite, actually. The UNSC has some cool vehicles in their back pocket.
Huh.
I remember having a lot of fun with something called a Wolverine, which was... you take the turret off of a Scorpion, and you put just a giant rack of missiles on it instead. Very enjoyable.
Smart.
Mechanic-wise, Halo Wars 1 reminded me a lot of Dawn of War. Smaller unit caps, big focus on, like, smaller skirmish groups. The base building is very similar. You have a central base that has nodes around it, and you just build inside those nodes. And as you upgrade your main base, you get more nodes, I believe it was. Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I spent 10 hours playing the campaign, and I enjoyed myself more than I thought I would. When you have an RTS with multiple races, it's usually the norm to have a campaign with all of those races, and Halo Wars only has the human campaign. There's no Covenant campaign, which is weird. It's a weird choice. The human campaign was pretty well polished, fully voice acted, that sort of thing. It had, like, cutscenes. There are other Spartans involved. Again, I don't remember a whole lot about the story specifically. I think, spoilers, I think the Spirit of Fire ends up getting stuck in slip space with, like, a flood infestation just barely contained or something like that. I don't know, maybe they'll be in Halo Infinite. I know Halo Infinite is going to be about continuing the story of Halo Wars 2, but I didn't play that one.
That's a bold choice.
Halo Wars 1 is on Steam. Halo Wars 2 is stuck in the Microsoft Store. So hey, funny story. While editing this video, I actually took a look, and it turns out that Halo Wars 2 was on sale for about $15 for the Complete Edition. I went ahead and bought it, so I will have an opinion on it at some point, but not before you're seeing this.
Well, as for my part on the other games, I've never played any of them.
Alright, well, other than that, it looks like that was the entire Master Chief Collection. All 6 games back to back. If 5 ever does come to PC, we'll play it and put it right here. If Infinite ever comes out, we'll do the same. I know that I've kind of accidentally just set myself up to do a Halo Wars video, but I should also mention that Halo 4 does have Spartan Ops, which is a collection of episodes that are 5 missions long each. They themselves are a mix of new maps, areas from the campaign, and multiplayer maps, and they're all put together to tell a side story that happens during the events of the main game. It's more Halo 4, so if you liked the gameplay, Spartan Ops, it's a perfectly reasonable time filler. It replaces Firefight, so it's your big wave defense, combat-focused side activity, and it does the job decently enough. There's some cool encounters, there are some duds, but if you just want to play more Halo 4, it's got you covered. We're not going to cover it here. We're excited to move on to other things, but I just wanted to mention it in case anybody was asking about it. It does exist, it is a real thing, it gets the job done. There you go. I'd like to thank everybody who came in and stuck with us. I know we're currently a fairly small channel, and I'm not gonna beg for, the YouTube stuff. This is a passion project, sort of. It's something I enjoy doing. You can be passionate and you can be passionately angry, alright?
I would call it a spite project, but let's just move on.
This has been a project born of spite. No, but I would like to sincerely thank the following we've garnered. It's been fun. Thanks for watching us. There are a lot of people on the internet, and you chose us, and thumbs up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sincerely.
Watch this space for more going forward. And if Halo Infinite does ever come out, we'll play it. I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll tear it apart as viciously as we did the rest of the series.
I'd like to not have to, right?
Right?
I'd like to be playing. I'd like to be playing Halo Infinite and realize that I'm having a good time. I don't want to dislike things. I realize I've been a little cynical overall in this series, but I like to think that I also gave praise where it's truly due. And you know what? I want to like Infinite. I want it to be a good game. I have a very weird set of expectations for it, I realize. I hope it meets them. The end. Yeah.
Yep. Thoughts and prayers for the team behind Halo Infinite, right? Hopefully they can get something out that will really just wow and impress. But until then, we've covered the mainline Halo games about as exhaustively as we possibly can, without compromising our own sanity. So thank you dearly for coming on this journey with us.
Yeah, it's been enjoyable.
It's certainly been something that I experienced.
Alright, well, farewell to all, and good luck in your future endeavors. Have a good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever. And you know what? I'll do one YouTube thing now that we're done. If you know somebody who you think would like to hear these opinions that you've just heard, send them our way. There you go. Most importantly, play games that you like. Just always ask yourself why you like them, because that'll let you find more things that you like, and that is always a good thing. Goodbye.
Farewell.